Good evening. The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, January 12th, 2022 is now called to order. Before continuing with the regular agenda, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Planning Manager, Ms. Armour, who will address the rules of decorum and civility tonight.
Ms. Armour, we're not seeing the video. Just give it 1 second. Looks like their Zoom has crashed, so they're logging back in. Sorry for the delay.
The public is welcome to participate in the meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meeting is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. For the benefit of the entire community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the agenda. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at board, commission, or committee meetings. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at board, commission, or committee meetings. All public comments at the board, commission, or committee meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the chair may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the commissioners exiting the chamber or meeting room. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the commissioners would return to the chamber or meeting room and the chair would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a board, commission, or committee meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code, Section 403.
Thank you for that very important message. It's unfortunate that we need to produce that, but meetings do need to be conducted with decorum. And with that, Director Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Clark.
Present.
Commissioner Tavana.
Here.
Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Raspy.
Here.
Commissioner Barnett.
Present.
And Chair Janoff.
Here. Thank you. And I'd like to start the meeting by welcoming our new commissioners, Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Raspy. We're glad to have you with us, and we look forward to your important participation. Thank you. As the Planning Commission conducts this meeting on behalf of the Town Council and residents of Los Gatos, we encourage active participation, which is essential for democracy and critical to the work of the Planning Commission. Your participation can occur through written comments about agenda items submitted to staff prior to a meeting. These are always helpful and welcome. During our meeting, there are 2 opportunities for members of the public to participate. During the verbal communications, an individual may speak on any topic not on the agenda. And during the hearing of a specific agenda item, any member of the public may speak about that item on the agenda. When called to speak, please state your name and address for the record. You may choose to speak anonymously. However, this meeting is being recorded. It is requested that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. We've now come to the verbal communications portion of our meeting. At this time, members of the public are invited to address the commission on any issue not on the agenda. Dr. Paulson, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak at this time?
Thank you, Chair Janoff. I don't see any hands raised for items that are not on the agenda.
All right, then we'll continue to the consent calendar. Tonight we have 1 item to be acted upon with a single motion, and that is approval of the drafted minutes of the December 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Does any commission member or member of the public wish to pull the item from the consent calendar?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair, on the public side.
And I don't see any on the commission side. Seeing none, may I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar? Commissioner Hanson.
I move that we approve the consent calendar, which consists of the meeting minutes from our meeting on December 8th, 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Thomas.
I second.
Thank you. And now we'll call a roll vote. Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Tavana,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yeah.
And I vote yes as well. The motion passes. We now move on to the public hearing, agenda item number 2, which is requesting approval for demolition of an existing single-family residence and construction of a new single-family residence to exceed floor area ratio standards with reduced front and side setbacks on non-conforming property, zoned R1D, located at 118 Olive Street, APN 410-15-022. Architecture and site application S21013, property owner Thomas and Meredith Reichert, applicant J. Plett Architect. I understand Mr. Mullen will be giving the staff report tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Before you this evening is a request to demolish an existing residence and construct a new 2-story residence. The subject property is non-conforming as to size, being 3,680 square feet where 5,000 is required. The proposed 2-story residence would be 1,677 square feet with a 299 square foot garage. The project also includes a partial 1,195 square foot basement that does not count towards the FAR. The applicant is requesting approval to exceed the allowable FAR for the property for reduced front and side yard setbacks and for an exemption from the parking requirements. The applicant proposes a contemporary 2-story residence with traditional forms, natural materials, and neutral colors. The project was reviewed by the town's consulting architect, who noted that the proposed residence had the potential to blend well with the immediate neighborhood. The consulting architect provided 6 recommendations for the project to increase its consistency with the residential design guidelines and surrounding neighborhood. The applicant responded through design changes and written justification as detailed in your staff report. As mentioned, the project would exceed the floor area by 9% or 308 square feet. The Planning Commission may approve an FAR above what is allowed when making findings related to the consistency with the residential design guidelines and compatibility with the surrounding properties. At the requested size, the residence would be the 3rd largest in terms of FAR and square footage in the immediate neighborhood. There are also 4 other homes in the immediate neighborhood that exceed their allowable FAR, and the FAR of the proposed residence would rank in the middle of these homes. The project also proposes reduced front and rear setbacks on a non-conforming lot. Required setbacks on a non-conforming property, as well as other rules of the zone, may be modified under an architecture and site application when findings can be made related to the proposal's compatibility with the neighborhood. The proposed residence includes a front setback of 10 feet where 15 feet is required, and a left side setback of 3 feet where 5 feet is required. And the applicant has provided examples of homes along Olive Street with reduced front and side yard setbacks consistent with the proposed residence. Lastly, the town code requires that 2 off-street parking spaces be provided for a single-family residence. The code also allows for exemptions from these parking requirements when a property is found to not have adequate parking area. The subject property, as mentioned, is non-conforming as to size. The existing residence includes a single non-compliant parking space in the garage, and the proposed residence would include a 1-car garage meeting the required dimensions for a parking space and would be consistent with the neighborhood pattern of 1-car garages. Based on the analysis provided in your staff report, staff recommends approval of the architecture and site application, subject to the recommended conditions of approval included in Exhibit 3. An addendum to your staff report has been distributed this evening, including a response to public comments prepared by the property owner and additional public comment received after publishing of the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Mullen. Before I proceed with any questions of you, may I see a show of hands of commissioners who have visited this property? Thank you very much. Now, do commissioners have any questions for Mr. Mullen or staff at this time? I don't see any hands raised, so we will now open the public hearing and give the applicant up to 5 minutes to address the commission.
Thank you. Whoever's going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to allow 1 second. Looks like I have a hand from Darren, but I don't believe that's the applicant. Mr. Plett for the property owner. Okay, Mr. Plett, you can unmute yourself and you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, commission members. I'm the project architect for this house. We designed this project with regard to the town's design guidelines, consultation with staff, and also the consulting architect. The neighborhood is in a state of transition with regards to young families moving in and homes being enlarged to accommodate them. From the inception of the project's design, we sought to design a home which blends in with the fabric of the neighborhood, neither the largest floor area nor the largest floor area ratio, but to fall within the average of the 4 largest homes. The form of the home is consistent with traditional American design and closely resembles the form and mass of several neighboring houses. As a result of these efforts, staff has recommended approval of the project. We believe it is also worthy of your approval. I'd like to allow the owners now to speak as well on behalf of the project.
Thanks, Jay. Also, thank you all for inviting us here to go to the project. It is also our first council meeting, so I know it sounded like there was a few new council members, so welcome for you guys, but it's our very first meeting. We moved into the neighborhood about a year ago. I'm here with my wife, and grandma, who lives about 7 minutes away, is watching the 2 kids at home. We love this neighborhood, and my wife grew up here, so we're happy to be back here close and with family. We are excited to be expanding the potential to expand this house to meet the demands of our family and continue to have and grow a long time here in the community, especially given some of the constraints that COVID has brought to us in our new environment, when oftentimes the kids have to be home from school or we have to work from home. A little extra space has proven this last 2 years that really could make a big difference in some mental well-being and home life balance. We chose to work with Jay. He designed a few houses in the neighborhood, including several on this exact block. He has his home office here in downtown Los Gatos, and really helped us to get a good sense for working with Jay, that he has a good understanding of the context of the neighborhood, working with the town, both planning, building, and commission over time. So, that's been a wonderful part of the process for us. And I think something in particular about Jay that I really liked is that he helped us as homeowners who have never done a project like this get a good sense of understanding how to come to a very realistic type project where, we may have come to the table saying we wanted a very large house, or we want like, you kind of want everything and every cake and eat it too. And right from the beginning, Jay sort of brought us to reality and said, don't submit that. You need to submit something that's way more realistic. You need to come in here. So, going through that process with Jay and kudos also to Sean and his team is the very first time that we went in for submittal. We started from a point of something that was already reasonable and fit. And then we were able to make very meaningful changes through the process that we were okay with from the beginning. So I've been really happy with the process so far, and just wanted to say thanks both to Jay and the neighbors who've helped us get to this point. So appreciate it.
Thank you for the comments. And at this time, do commissioners have questions for the applicant or homeowner? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you for your comments and presentation. I wanted to ask about neighborhood outreach. I read everything that was in the staff report, and I read your letter. I'm talking about the applicant in terms of talking about some of the neighbors that you knew and how you became friends with them. And then as I read on, then there was a letter signed by about 8 neighbors opposing your project. So what I wanted to understand was what process you went through to do neighborhood outreach. Did you reach out to everyone or just the people that you knew? And then what did you discuss with them? Did you share your plans, or did you just tell them about your project?
Yeah, Jay, on mute, or are we good?
This is for Mr. Reichert.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the great question. In the first letter that I think you just referenced, I think a lot of it, as we allude to, it's pretty difficult during this time of COVID. Even this meeting itself is, being hosted virtually, and we had just moved to the neighborhood, so we didn't know a single person before we moved in. So to answer your question very directly, is we didn't reach out to everyone for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't know anyone, so we reached out to quite a few people. In our own personal comfort level during COVID, we were in pretty tight of a bubble. We lived with close family that had some potential issues. So the people that we did meet were actually really closely related to where the kids were going to school and people that we had passed in the street. We didn't go knocking door to door, anything like that. One part of the process that I would highlight is actually we erected the flagpoles significantly longer than they would need to be required. Part of that is the process of that's a way for us to communicate our intentions and sort of freely let everyone know, not just the 10-day minimum.
Okay. And then am I to understand the response that you gave was primarily to that letter with the objections that were raised by several neighbors?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
You had given a response. We got it in the desk item or the addendum yesterday, I guess it was, and and you talked about some different points, and you had some drawings, and what was that intended to address the neighbors in opposition?
That's correct.
Okay, and then my final question, and I'll be done, Chair. You had two different drawings that your architect put up. And one was included in the addendum, which was where you had offered to basically take off that deck to the side. So you had 2 versions. So you're you're willing to do that, but we would probably want to keep it. Where do you stand on that?
That's a great point. I understand we had 3 minutes at the end of public comment, and I was hoping to talk about that a little bit based on if there was more potential comments. But to talk to your point, we have a potential modified plan that might address some of the concerns that we brought up with more detail between understanding what that comment was and now. And we would be open to modifying the plan in that way as a concession to, I think the concern specifically was around privacy. So yes, open to modifying it in a way that allows them to maintain that privacy.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
And I have one more follow-up question regarding the long term of the story poles. Did you receive any direct communication by mail, email, notes left on your doorstep from your neighbors once those story poles went up?
Yeah.
Or
Talking about
were the objections that we saw in the staff report, were those new to you?
every single person who signed that letter, I actually had never talked to before. Coincidentally, after that, I had talked to a few of them, reached out. Some didn't hear back from, a couple of them I did. Yeah, and we talked about the project and shared plans directly. But yeah, to your point, we had not talked to a single person, not a note, not a phone call, not a come to the door to say anything.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions of the applicant at this time? Commissioner Barnett.
I actually have 5 questions. I don't want to monopolize the evening, but I wonder if we could get started on some of them anyway. My first question is as to the proposed deck. Is that 2 feet or more above grade? The reason I ask is that the residential design guidelines say that there need to be special setbacks under those circumstances.
Are you referring to the deck in the backyard or the one off of the master bedroom above the garage?
In the backyard, not the terrace off the MBR.
The proposed deck is under 2 feet and actually it's just a level walkout from the back door. So it's not about 2 feet.
Okay, thank you for that. And if I might ask further, are there provisions made, I couldn't tell from the plans, are there provisions made to protect the privacy of 120 Olive by, with respect to the window placement, the window size, and the window type?
Yeah, great question. I think the terrace is probably the thing that probably impedes the biggest part of their privacy. In terms of windows, 0 of the windows face that direction, and I think that's goes a long way with the potential modification. Yeah, the windows that are in the master bedroom that face towards 120 Olive are all clear story. Like you can't see them when you're walking, even in our side of the house. It's just for light.
Okay, thank you. If I might continue, the architect recommended the continuation of the stone on the front facade around the sides for continuity, and I understand that that was rejected by the owner. I was wondering if you could comment further on that.
Oh, maybe it was misspoke on our side. I agree with it. We should wrap the stone around the corner of the front, and I think that's the way that Sean and Larry Cannon came with it. So maybe I just misclarified. So yes, that's in the intent.
Thank you for that clarification. Let me see here, checking my notes. Oh, I noticed there's a possible provision for an elevator for the car parking. I was wondering if that's part of the intended project and if that would allow space for parking for a 3rd vehicle.
That's the intent. We've planned it with Jay, so that would be possible. And I think ultimately it will come down to a financial decision. Like if it costs way too much money, then it will be very difficult for us to accommodate that additional parking spot. I really want it. I think it provides, an additional off-street spot. And I just really like the idea of having, an extra car in the garage.
I'm going to have a final question for Mr. Schultz. I know you've commented previously about the issue of the law in the town code with respect to the right to a view. And I wonder if you, for the record in this matter, if you could repeat your advice on that point.
Yes, thank you. Yes, our code does not address views whatsoever. I do know some jurisdictions that have adopted codes that do protect views, but unless it's specifically set forth in the code or the general plan, there is no right to a view.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
I noticed.
Sorry, the commissioner is done asking questions of the homeowner, but I do have one additional question, Precious. This is for the architect. Mr. Plett, you refer to the house at 114 as being similar in mass as 118. Can you tell me the height of 114 and the height of 118, please?
Okay, 1 gonna go. 114 is about 20 feet. And then 118, we're at 27.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Yes, Commissioner Clark.
Hey, I have a few questions. First is just that, so you're requesting a reduction of the front setback, and I wanted to ask if it had been an option to reduce the back setback instead, and if so, or if there was some wiggle room there, and if so, why you're not reducing that.
Yeah, the front setback, we are asking for that. We are by no means even at the 10 feet. The closest front setback, some are as low as 5. So we shot to do that. It articulates the front elevation and the massing very well. And we also would like to preserve as much of the backyard as possible because it's such a small site. So that was the reasoning with that. The backyard, a play area for the kids.
Okay. Thank you. And something else I wanted to ask about was the suggestion by the architect to add trim. And it sounded like y'all aren't going to do that. And I wanted to first verify that that's still the case, and then also ask to hear your reasoning.
Yeah, the windows will be inset instead of having trim that would protrude on the building face. In lieu of that, the windows will be set in and recessed into the wall.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a follow-up about the 120 Olive property. So that was something that struck me during the site visit, was how close it seemed like the buildings would be together and then how tall both of them would be. Are those neighbors supportive of this project, or do you know?
Yeah, Commissioner Clark, both the homeowner and the renter are both not in support. And I did reach out to both of them and unfortunately was unable to even talk to them. One of them had COVID and a trial case they were working on, and the other was just unable to communicate outside of just signing the letter. So no, we have not been able to communicate with either of the people at that location. I think in my response letter, what I was able to think might be a good compromise without having the ability to talk to them was, we're not proposing anything that they don't have. They have a 3-foot setback. We like a 3-foot setback. They have a 2-story. We would like a 2-story. And their 2-story is the entire length of the home. We're only proposing to have 2-story on a very short portion of the home outside of the garage.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
If I could add to that, only the first, the ground level is asking for the 3-foot setback. The second floor is a 5-foot setback as it exists right now.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And one last question is something that the neighbors brought up in that letter that they signed was the excavation that will be necessary for such a large basement. And I was wondering if that's anything that you would ever consider like eliminating or reducing just because of how inconvenient it sounds like that could be.
Yeah, well, obviously we're not to that part of the building process yet. But one of the things we did was we already hired the soils engineer to even let us know if it was possible to build on that site. We did that in advance at risk to understand better understand it from our perspective. And he suggested using a technique called stitch piering, which allows us to do the entire construction on our side of the fence, sitting property line.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right, thank you. And I just want to remind the commission, especially our newer members, that we'll know more if we hear from the members of the public how these particular concerns are articulated, and then the applicant will have a chance to address those in his next session. So do we have any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Barnett.
I'm sorry, I have one follow-up question. Is the height of the proposed residence lower than the height of 120?
Thanks for that, Mr. Barrett. Yes, the height of our proposed product is lower than both of the two heights of the western properties. Yes.
Okay, I thought that's how I read your material, but thank you for that.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? I don't see any hands raised. So at this time, we will ask if any members of the public would like to speak on this item.
Yes, the first speaker will be Darren. You have 3 minutes. Darren, you can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes. Darren doesn't appear to be able to unmute himself. Try one thing. We will remove his permission and try to come back to him. Next will be Shelley. Shelley, you can unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hello, Shelley, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, well, good evening to all. And thanks for your time. I do no longer live at 120 Olive Street, but in 2004, we did purchase that home for 2 reasons. Number one, it has a beautiful amount of natural light that streams through the entire home. That was number one. Number two, there's a quite beautiful mountain view, out of the master suite, which is the only second story part to this home. And it was probably done back in the 40s. And this home, by the way, is approximately 1,500 square feet total. So we bought the home for those reasons. And this is also a reason why since 2012, it is, easy to rent. People go in, this is a happy place. It's bright, it's sunny, it's cozy, it's cute, it's open. And it's very dated also inside. It's an old house, right? But it's very easy to rent. But our intentions, we moved up in the hills of Los Gatos, but our intentions are during retirement to move back to 120 Olive Street. So it's not just like a rental property for us. Although when you have a rental, you also, of course, very much care about the value of the home, which I do. And I just feel like the property, I looked very carefully. I read through what was available early on. Well, about a month and a half ago. The shadow study scared me. I looked at it very carefully, watching the way that from mid-December to June, that this home, the lighting entering the home from the entry, entering the light coming into the entry, the kitchen, the living room, the dining, the master, and our backyard will be completely in the shadow for most of the day. And that's December, January, February, March, these are the months where you need light more than anything. So that was exceptionally, disturbing to me. The privacy, of course, reducing a setback. It's only a 5-foot setback to 3 feet. I mean, I just don't understand, the house is enormous. I mean, I know there's other enormous houses, but these are the tiniest lots. I mean, that's actually why we left, because we have 3 children and we're like, okay, we better go get a space so they have a place because it's tiny. So I just feel like reducing setbacks and putting the house closer to the street, and it's already going to be very vertical. It just and exceeding the FAR, all those reasons, those are the reasons why I'm not in agreement with it. And even if I didn't live right next door, I mean, I feel like 120 Olive will be most imposed more than any other home directly on the street based on its proximity. But even if I lived down the street or around the corner, it's something that I don't think we should set up precedents for. Let's exceed the FAR, let's reduce the setbacks front and side. That's not where, that's not where I stand in the whole, housing, Los Gatos downtown. That's not my stance. It never has been. So anyhow, I see if I have any notes here. I've just started kind of speaking from my head. Yeah, I mean, if you visited the site, you can see that if that terrace does remain, I heard that is now in question. But if that terrace does remain, yes, it looks right.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt you. Your time has expired.
Okay.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for Ms. Baker? Commissioner Hanson.
So thank you for sharing all of your concerns about the project. So from your point of view, I mean, what would bring this project to make it acceptable from your point of view?
Well, at the bare minimum, I would say I would not reduce setbacks. They're already, the lots are 3,600 square feet, right? So, I mean, why reduce setbacks on a home that is already exceeding the FAR? And I wouldn't even say exceed the FAR, because then the next house is going to exceed the FAR because this one did. It sets a precedence, and it's not a street for large houses. I know we have a few, that's great, but not. I mean, it's just not. They're tiny. There's no parking. I mean, we lived there for 10 years, so we know what it's like. So what would I do?
Commissioner Hanson, has your question been? Not yet.
I mean, unless there was something else. I mean, what I was looking for a specific suggestion. So you said that you were, if the setback was not reduced, then that would be an issue. But I did want to follow up on that. The applicant claimed that you also have a 3-foot setback. Is that correct?
My house is, no, I do not believe so. On one side, on the uphill side, there is a smaller setback. And yeah,
Okay.
and that's because the lot line was done. We had a problem with the lot line. You know, hold on. This is Darren Carroll as well, because he probably couldn't unmute. So I can arrange if you would like to hear from Darren Carroll as well.
Let's
okay.
Ms. Baker, hang on. Let's let Director Paulson manage the speakers and their sequence. Commissioner Hanson, do you have any further questions?
No.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Baker? I don't see any hands raised. So thank you for your comments, Ms. Baker. And Director Paulson, do we have any other speakers tonight?
We do. The next speaker will be Mark. Mark, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Boscovich. I live at 112 Olive Street. I live a couple houses down from the Reicherts. I've had the pleasure of spending time with their family. We have a young family as well, and they're a wonderful family, and we love their design. We think it will just be a beautiful addition to this neighborhood. We see it as a huge upgrade. It's going to raise the values of all the homes in this beautiful street. And it really is, it has that Los Gatos touch, thanks to a great Los Gatos architect in Jay Plett. And then I've been hearing a lot of comments about the setbacks. And I don't know if you've taken a really close look at this street, but the setbacks are all unorthodox in this area. I live next to a home. My next door neighbor's setback from the front is probably 4 to 5 feet, you know, and that's just kind of the norm in this neighborhood, unorthodox setbacks. And so I don't think it's setting any kind of dangerous precedent. Most of the places in this area have different unusual setbacks.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Boscovich. Any questions from commissioners? I don't see any hands raised.
Can I make one more comment too? And I just want to say that the Reicherts made a huge effort with some of the neighbors, including myself, to speak with us to make sure that we were okay with the plans. I think they did their best under some very difficult circumstances.
All right, thank you for that addition. Director Paulson, do we have any other speakers who wish to address the commission?
We do. The next speaker will be Bonnie. Bonnie, if you unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Bonnie Hurwitz, and I'm at 121 Olive Street. I've lived here for 18 years. And so, yes, it's an eclectic neighborhood. The gentleman that just spoke before me is brand new to the neighborhood, and I don't think has as much experience living here, probably been here maybe 2-3 months. The reason that I'm speaking up is because we've already discussed at length the size of the proposed home, so I'm not going to belabor that again. But I do need to address the parking situation on this street. It is quite a narrow street with parking that alternates between one side and another. And to add additional parking that's really outside the scope of what the norm should be is really going to be problematic. It's already permit-only parking on this street, which means that when everybody's got a car on the street, I personally have had to go around the block and park around the corner from where my home is. And that's really problematic as far as I'm concerned. As regards the outreach portion of this, again, I've lived here for 18 years and nobody came to talk to me at all. And I see that as a huge issue. Yes, we have a pandemic. Yes, I understand we don't want to be up close and personal with people we don't know, but there was no correspondence, no letter provided in my mailbox, which sits on the outside of my house. There was nothing that I was not approached in any fashion to address these new neighbors, to explain what their position was on any of this. And to me, it was quite a surprise. When I saw those poles go up, I was really shocked at the size of the proposed structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hurwitz. Do any commissioners have questions at this time? Commissioner Raspy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ms. Hurwitz, first of all, thank you for your comments and for taking the time to appear this evening. I wanted to ask you one question specifically with respect to parking. The materials we provided seem to indicate that there is a neighborhood of, or rather a pattern of one-car garages in that neighborhood, and that this project would fall into that norm or pattern. Do you find that to be an accurate statement, or do you have a different experience?
Well, I personally have an easement for my home. I don't have a driveway that sits on Olive Street. I have an easement that is provided on Thurston, which is a street just parallel to Olive. So I'm probably out of the norm. But having said that, most of the homes do have one-car garages. But also having said that, many of those homes are too small for cars. So, for example, on one side of me, there's a home where it's way too small it probably fit a car from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but it doesn't, that garage and many of the other garages on Olive Street do not fit conventional cars that are built today, which means people are on the street parking. And again, it's permit-only parking. And with permit-only parking, you get two spots and then that's it. So to have this structure.
Let me just interrupt you, Ms. Hurwitz. Commissioner Raspy, did you have your question answered?
Thank you. Yeah, my question's been answered. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do have a follow-up question. It's my understanding that the current house has a non-conforming garage and a car doesn't fit into it, and that the proposed project would have a garage that a modern car would fit into. Does that not sound like it would contribute to easing some of the parking problems?
Well, not from the size of the driveway, from what I recall seeing on the drawing, and I don't have the drawing in front of me, but some of the homes on the street have longer driveways that can actually fit an additional car in the driveway itself, so that parking on the street is not, impacted. But I thought this had a shorter driveway where that wouldn't be possible.
All right, thank you for your comments. Any other questions for Ms. Hurwitz? I don't see any hands raised. Director Paulson, do we have anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
You want me to try Darren one more time? We do have additional speakers, but I'm going to try to see if he can unmute himself. Darren, it looks like you have unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you.
Hi, it's Darren. Is anybody there?
We are here and we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
We can hear you, Darren.
Yeah, I'm not getting on. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I can't hear you guys at all now.
And we can hear him, but he apparently can't hear us.
I may have it now. I'm sorry. This is Darren Carroll. Can I speak?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just first time I've done this. Anyhow, what I want to say is that several of the people that signed that letter with the 8 signatures asked me to just relay the fact that their position hasn't changed. They're just unable to call in because of several reasons, including not being technically savvy, as obviously I should be in that category. But I'd also like to point out there's a couple of other things on they're not necessarily specific to the house, but in the notification process, and that is the netting. I don't think it depicts the true setting of the house to the southeast corner. And the architect's summary and the signs on the property say that it is a addition, not a new construction. And that's confusing and misleading. And several people walking the neighborhood have said, oh, they're adding on. It's like, no, they're building new. So I think the implications might be a little bit deceiving on that. So along with that, my main concerns are the setback requirements. I just feel they're starting with a clean slate. There's no real mitigating circumstances that dictate a size reduction or a font reduction or setbacks on it. You know, I know my house is a larger house on the neighborhood, but I didn't ask for any of the building setback requirements on that. And I was able to do a nice house, and I can have more restrictive setbacks than that one does, excuse me. So I just like to point out, you know, Olive Street's probably the narrowest street with the smallest lots in the whole town. And when you turn onto Olive Street from San Benito or from Santa Cruz Avenue, the netting on that house, it just eclipses everything around it, including pretty much mine. You know, I think that there's a nice house that can be designed there, and I'm not denying anybody that possibility, but I just don't see the need to build a house that's almost 28 feet tall, 10 feet from the front of the property. And it just is going to look like a lighthouse there. It really, if they want to build that house, meet the setbacks. That's my biggest concern. You know, and I've always been under the impression that there was some sort of a community benefit by building a house that you had to put into it, whether it was additional parking or landscaping or a privacy concern or something like that. And I just truly don't see that. I mean, I see a big, huge house that's making every attempt to manipulate every avenue to build a big house on a lot that truly doesn't support it. And that's why I'm asking the town, specifically your people tonight, do not support this. And if I have extra time, I'd like to address a couple of questions that were brought up earlier regarding notification to neighbors and when the story polls went up. Is that okay?
Darren, it looks like your time is up, so you won't be able to proceed. But I do want to ask commissioners if you have questions for this speaker.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. I'm sorry, Commissioner Barnett, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Darren, can you tell me what the height of your residence is?
Offhand, I can't. I believe it, but I'm going to guess it's tall. It's like but my house is on a corner that has a 9-foot shift from end to end. So from the front of my house, which is on San Benito Avenue, it's just a normal 2-story house. If you walk around to the back of my property, there's a walkout basement, and that's just fitting the topography. This is not where I had a flat lot to build with, and I wanted to go that high. If you took all of my levels, 3 of them, I don't exceed the 28 feet that house is above grade. So what's visible in my house from the front and the back are substantially lower than that. I just have the benefit of being, or I don't know if the benefit, but being higher topographically than that property, and a lot that has, it was very difficult to design a house for because of
I do understand your response, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Darren.
Yep.
At this time, ask Director Paulson if there are other speakers on this matter.
Yes, the next speaker will be Lee. I'm assuming she hasn't fixed her Zoom issue, so I'm going to have to promote her real quick.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just like to I have a few comments. One of them is on the history of the San Benito house that is included in the comparison table. I have 2 comments. One, if my memory serves me well, when I was on the Planning Commission, that house was a very difficult decision. It was very controversial, and it was a split decision because of the fact that it does seem to be so big, and there was fear that that would lead to a domino effect down Olive. Other thing I would like to say is that this was originally proposed as a remodel. As a remodel, they would not have had to fix the non-conforming setbacks to the sides. But as a demo, the town says that you have to meet the requirements of the zone. In this case, that means wider setbacks. However, there are provisions for exceptions for non-conforming residents. However, this project is asking for 4 or 5 different exemptions, and each one may individually meet the findings, but cumulatively, it may have a bigger impact. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that it's my understanding that granting an exception is not required. The commission may grant an exception if they meet the findings necessary, but they're not required to. And so I would ask you to very carefully consider what exceptions you actually give. I think the parking might be reasonable in the sense that they are making the garage more conforming than it had been, but I also question shortening the driveway, and specifically the request for an exemption to the FAR. They're using a cellar, and the cellar policy states that it should be in lieu of visible space. It doesn't say that it counts towards the FAR, but it should help with a house being more consistent with the others in the neighborhood. And the last thing I want to say is that I do have a very personal feeling about Olive. I think it was one of the cutest streets in the town. I really love that street because of all the small cottages that were there, and it's changing so that it's no longer that's its character. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any hands raised. Director Paulson, do we have anyone else wishing to speak on this topic?
We do. The next speaker will be Leslie.
Thank you, Director Paulson. Can you hear me? Great.
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Leslie Garrison. I own the property at 15 Ashler Avenue on the other side of the fence from Olive Street. I've lived here since 2016 with my family, and my son is currently in Cub Scouts with the Reichert's daughter, whom we've had the pleasure to meet and frankly get to know very well as a direct result of being neighbors. So having just completed, frankly, my own renovation on a historic property, I've come to appreciate this process. So thank you for considering my comments. I find the Reichert proposal to be a tasteful plan. It's in line with the neighborhood aesthetics and is likely to yield broader property value improvements, frankly, for the wider neighborhood. As a full-time working parent with one child already in Los Gatos Public Schools and soon to have 3 in Los Gatos Public Schools, I can relate to some of the constraints and desires of the Reichert family. And given my stellar experience in this neighborhood, I love living here. I really encourage the commissioners to reduce barriers to new families being able to buy and stay here in our beautiful, walkable neighborhood, rather than create conditions that push families further away. So I really do understand and appreciate all comments being made tonight, and I understand that reasonable minds can disagree on these details, but I really welcome neighbors to respectfully make efforts to do more with less space. And I express my support for this plan. Thank you for considering my input.
Thank you, Ms. Garrison, for your comments. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any hands raised. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak?
We do. The next speaker will be Marcus.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm at 114 Olive Street. Our house was recently remodeled right before the end of COVID. Jay Plutt was our architect. My wife, Celeste, and I have been here since 2014 when this house was originally 800 square feet. Obviously, that's not enough space to accommodate a growing family. We have 2 boys now. both of which are, one is in school at Dave's, the other is in preschool at Growing Footprint. But to mirror the point made by the Ashler neighbor, we appreciate, how nice this neighborhood is, but also need to find ways to accommodate the changing demographics in this town, the growing families that are trying to move in. My wife and I, we had a very difficult submission process for our remodel. We actually tried to do 2 stories as well, but because of the what would you say, the feedback from neighbors around us, we were very discouraged from that and had to compromise with a different plan. We hope that, with the Reicherts, having met them and gotten to know them very well, that, they don't have to also compromise if they don't have to. And we are very in support of their project.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb, for your comments. Do any commissioners have questions for Mr. Lamb? I don't see any hands raised, so thank you for that. Director Paulson, do we have other speakers on this item?
Next speaker will be Andrea.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name is Andrea Galatea. I am actually the renter at 120 Olive. And I just wanted to make a few comments. So I've lived here I have 3 children, twin daughters and my son and myself. And it was, Mr. Riker was very, very nice to come over, and I was very busy with some trial stuff that I was doing. But I did want to make a comment because I saw the orange, all the stuff coming up about a month ago. And the first thing that I wanted to say was when we rented, we moved from Saratoga, what drew me to this house was the character and the charm of that small town feel that, and I think that a large house like this, though I'm sure it will be very beautiful, probably belongs on a larger property. And because I think that it does, the aesthetics of it, though very pretty, it takes away from the feel of the neighborhood and that quaintness of the neighborhood charm that we have here. As far as the setbacks, the other thing that drew me to this house was the light and all of the beautiful windows. And it is an old house, but that's the charm that I like is, the single pane windows. But when I wake up and I have my coffee in the morning in the little front area of the sunroom, what I love is the views and the light and being able to watch the sunrise. And I think that all I will see are walls of the neighboring home. And whether it's me or somebody else, that's what they will see. Also, the master bedroom, it will be, instead of looking out at a beautiful view, I mean, from my bed, I can see at night, I can see the moon, and there's a huge pine tree up off in the distance, and all that will be gone. And it will darken the master bedroom. And so definitely, the light in the home is going to be gone.
Andrea, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Do any commissioners have questions for Andrea? I don't see any hands raised. Thank you. Dr. Paulson, do we have any other speakers on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I see Shelley has her hand raised again. I'm not sure if she has another member of the household that wants to speak. I'm going to allow her to talk just to answer that question. Shelley, is there another member of the household? Oh, looks like she has lowered her hand, so.
All right, thank you. So do we have any other speakers?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time. Again, I see Mark, who already spoke as well. Let's see if there's another member of the household that wants to speak. Mark?
Hi, David. This is Christy Boscovich. I'm Mark's wife. I am sorry, I was helping to get the kids to bed. But I just wanted to add in a note of how supportive we are of the Reichert's plan. They're just such a wonderful family in the community. We've really enjoyed getting to know them. They have a daughter at Dave's, and they've just been so wonderful and really have that community spirit of bringing everyone together. And I really just want to support more and more young families coming to our street. And we just think that their plan is so tasteful. It's very thoughtful. I thought it was such a smart idea to do the basement so that they could get a little more space to, so that, when everyone's at home in this COVID world, they have that, but it's not making the house super, super large. I think it's going to look very tasteful, very beautiful, and really start to match the neighborhood. And we're just so supportive, and we really hope that they can build the house of their dreams, and they can build this family and live here a really long time, and really just continue to contribute to the Los Gatos community.
Thank you for your comments. Do any commissioners have questions at this time? I don't see any hands raised. Director Paulson, are there any other speakers on this matter?
There are not, so we would go back to the applicant.
All right, thank you for that. So at this time, we'll invite the applicant to come back to the commission. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address any of the comments made or provide any additional information.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for participating. And I think Leslie, what she said made it resonate the most in my head is that, that we can all communicate on this civilly and all have, a good way of communicating and talking about it. So I appreciate everyone participating. I think first I want to start with Andrea and Shelley at 120. I think it's some really good points. One of the proposals that they talked about was they made a large focus on the light. And when we look at the lighting study, the part of the house that they're talking about, as Andrea mentioned, she has her morning coffee there. And actually, that's probably when I see her the most, give a wave or pass by. That part of the house is actually not proposed to change one bit. It's not getting any closer to the front setback. And they will not lose, the lighting study changes 0. We're not going to be going up higher than the garage at that point. And I think that's not necessarily intentional. We didn't know that was a big part of the potential concern. But in terms of the context and the neighborhood plan and the fact that they won't be losing any light in that main living area, their view won't change at all. And then in terms of the back where the second story is, unfortunately, we are proposing a second story right next to their second story. So that's, the kind of, I'm not sure what considerations can be made there. That's kind of what we're just asking for. That's a second story right next to their second story. Jay, you got something?
Yeah. I'd just like to add that the statement was made that it's 10 feet away and it's 28 feet tall, and that's not quite accurate. It's 27 feet tall, and the second story portion of the house has a 15-foot setback. The 10-foot setback only pertains at the first floor, but the second story has a conforming setback of 15 feet, which I believe is correct in that neighborhood. And I would also differ with the perception. If you look at the house, if you look up from Santa Cruz Avenue, both 120 and especially 546 looms over our story poles. And by no means would our project be dominant. 546 will still be well above the perceptible view of our project. Our driveway length will not be changing.
Yeah, Jay, I wanted to point that out. One of the concerns I heard was from a neighbor, Bonnie. Sorry, we haven't met yet. I'm excited to potentially meet, and sorry that that's the circumstance. But the parking driveway, to Jay's point, we, in addition to having the new conforming proposed garage, a full-size car does fit in our current driveway, and we are proposing no changes to that. So both of our cars would be parked on site, on property, with the proposed plan. One other thing that I heard.
One moment, please. Director Paulson, are you indicating the time is expired?
Okay.
Yes, so your time has expired, but if commissioners have questions of the applicant, now's the time to ask. Yes, Commissioner Giovanna.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a one quick question. I can't quite see it clearly in the drawings, but can you, what is the length of the driveway as proposed?
I think Jay's going to try and measure it with his scale. We currently have a Honda CRV, and it fits without blocking any of the sidewalk because the ticket person is vigilant about making sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So it fits fully in the driveway.
Yeah, the existing driveway is 18 feet and will remain that way.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question on that. I'm looking at sheet C3, and it indicates that the driveway is 17'4". Are you, Mr. Platt, are you saying that the driveway is going to stay at 18, or will it actually be at 17'4"?
There's a slight variation between Jay's measuring off the property line, but technically the city owns part of the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
That could be the variation of the measurement. The dirt and grass and part of the driveway is technically part of the city property on our easement.
But it sounds like that area is parkable, and so we would probably add a few inches to the 17.4.
It's not part of the sidewalk, correct?
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? I do have one, probably for the architect. It's a little bit difficult to gather this because you don't have your elevations don't indicate what your plate heights are. Could you clarify what your ceiling heights are internal on each floor?
Yeah, we have a 10-foot ceiling in the main level. And then on the upper level, the plate heights vary. Let me go to the elevations here. So the plate heights vary from 8 feet in the master bedroom. At the rear, we have a plate of 7 feet. The master bathroom, we are at 6'6".
Let me make it a little easier. Is there a plate height on the second story that is over 8 feet?
No.
All right. And then the middle story, the living space, you say it has a 10-foot plate height. And then the lower, the basement level, it looks like it also has a 10-foot plate height.
No, hold on one second. Let me go to that sheet. It'd be 9 feet in the basement.
9. And could I just clarify, is it your intention at a future date to include a lift and a lower level garage in that area?
Yes.
All right. And is there a requirement for a 9-foot plate height for a subterranean garage?
I'm sorry, what's the question? I didn't quite catch that.
Is there a requirement for a 9-foot plate height in a garage?
In a basement garage, I've done them before with a 9-foot basement. I don't know if we could go lower than that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? All right, I don't see any hands raised. So at this time, we'll close the public hearing and ask on this item and ask if commissioners have any questions of staff, wish to comment on the application, introduce a motion, or anything else. Commissioner Hanson.
I'm going to go back to where I was asking a question earlier. My first reaction was, oh, there's a lot of neighbors that are supportive, and then when I saw the letter that was signed by 8 neighbors opposing the project, several of whom have spoken tonight, but not all, I think we have a situation that needs to be addressed. But as far as the application itself, it seems to be a pretty well designed house. I think they've made a lot of effort to make it fit into the neighborhood. But on the other hand, they are asking for quite a few exceptions. The far side back, front and side setbacks, and also the parking. So from my perspective, I think that it really isn't enough for them to answer some of these questions in the hearing tonight. I think that some additional work should be done with the 8 people that signed that letter to try and assuage some of their concerns. It may not be possible. We would hope that those people would be amenable to, being cooperative and trying to come up with a compromise. But from my perspective, I think that more work needs to be done with the neighbors in order for this to go through.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Do any other commissioners have comments, thoughts they'd like to share at this time? Let me ask a different question of the commissioners. Do we have a position on the commission where commissioners are in favor of the proposal as submitted to us tonight? Commissioner Tamana, Commissioner Barnett, Commissioner Raskin?
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I understand your concerns, Commissioner Hanson, but I'm not entirely sure, based on what I heard tonight, what the chief concern was. Some of it was FAR, but it's coming from neighbors who their own house have exceeded the FAR. Height was brought up as an issue, but looking at sheet A-1.1, Olive Street looking across from the project, and Olive Street looking at the project, the height is actually rather in line with a lot of the houses in the immediate neighborhood. So I'm not sure what the chief concern was and what could possibly be addressed by the by going back to the neighbors. So in general, I am in support of this project tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Tamana. Any other commissioners wish to speak? Yes, Commissioner Raspi.
Yeah, I'll join in Commissioner Tabana's comments. I noted in the materials and in the comments tonight that the home, in both its height and its setbacks and its FAR, wouldn't be unique if we were to grant the request as presented tonight. I thought the design was fairly thoughtful. My only concern in coming into the hearing, again, was the parking, and that concern has been assuaged, as well as the privacy concern. And as I understand it from the opening comments, the redesign would largely take care of the privacy concerns. So as presented, I'm in favor of this project.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Barnett.
I'll explain my reasoning as well. Residential design guidelines do put a lot of weight on neighborhood compatibility and character, but there's also language in there about the inevitability of change. And I think that this is a case where the neighborhood is in flux. I understand the desire of certain of the neighbors to maintain the traditional architectural values that are in place, but I think that, as was mentioned with growing families and frankly, the value of lots and the opportunity to improve them to current standards makes sense in this case. And I think that the exceptions already have been addressed or are justifiable under the code.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Barnett. Any other comments? I don't see any hands raised. Commissioner Thomas.
I am a little bit on the fence with all of this. I feel like coming into this, I think that this is a non-conforming lot. It's small, reduced setbacks are not were not a huge problem as far as I was concerned. I was a little bit surprised to hear so many neighbors commenting on that and the FAR, especially when a lot of so much of the neighborhood does exceed the FAR and does not have the regular setbacks. So from that perspective, I don't see like a huge issue with approving the application. I do wonder about though, like the square footage, the below grade square footage, is that really in lieu of above grade square footage? And I am a little bit, I understand the COVID situation, but I am a little bit, and being new to the neighborhood, I completely understand. It just kind of is unfortunate that it puts us in a position where like in between two parties because of the situation. And I know that part of our job is mediating. So I am interested to hear what Chair Janoff and Commissioner Hanson, what suggestions you have, because you've been doing this a lot longer than the rest of us.
Commissioner Hanson.
I should clarify that my comments were more directed at a continuance than they were at denying the application, because I think that I think at the end of the day, the application has merit, but I don't feel like the proper due diligence has been done with the neighbors. And I recognize the complications of COVID, but we've seen so many other hearings in the last year and a half where they've managed to figure out a way to connect with the neighbors on Zoom or on a phone call or something like that. So for me, I would feel better about approving this and the exceptions if that step had been done and could be done as a follow-up to this meeting to at least go over the plans with the neighbors and see if, I think they'll find that most of those concerns are actually addressed, but some of those neighbors didn't even come and speak tonight. So that I would be in favor of a continuance to give them time to speak to those other neighbors that are opposing. And that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I think you're correct, Commissioner Thomas. Our job is in some cases to mediate, but it is not to make a decision perhaps in a vacuum. So I think what Commissioners Raspi, Tabana, and Barnett are saying is important. This is a project that is technically has many merits, and it has the endorsement of the consulting architect. It does meet it helps the parking because of the driveway length and the conforming garage. So it's helping in those respects. I don't have an issue with the non-conforming setbacks. It seems to be standard in the neighborhood. These are exceptionally small lots. And how are you going to fit what you need to fit onto them without some exceptions? So I don't have an issue with that. I did have a bit of an issue with height. It's difficult for me to understand from the information we have from the architect. Story poles give you just sort of a basic data point, but we don't have the kind of elevation renderings that we often get at the Planning Commission, where we can really see the articulation of the design and see how you sort of get a little bit more perspective on where your mass is articulated forward or backward. So you begin to see the impact it might have on some of the neighboring structures. And I think that's important for us to see. I'm in favor of the project as it is, but I think it would be very helpful, especially for the neighbors, to be able to see how the massing of the proposed project looks. It looks so flat from these illustrations that we have. It's really difficult. Having said all of that, I think it's very important, especially in a neighborhood that's this tight physically and emotionally. You've got a lot of friendships yet to come. And I think it's important for the applicants to reach out to their neighbors, see if compromise can be made. It may be that is not possible, but at least show that you've respected your neighbors and your neighborhood and get a little feedback from them. It may change the position of a window in the master bedroom so that your neighbor on that side doesn't feel privacy has been infringed. So I'm actually in favor of the project, as our three commissioners have noted, but I would like to see more outreach to the neighborhood to make this really a neighborhood accepted project. I think having some harmony in the neighborhood rather than controversy is probably a good thing. So I would be in favor of Commissioner Hansen's request for a continuance in order for the neighborhood outreach to be developed, and then we can hear whether that outreach has resulted in any changes to the plans, large or small, at a continued meeting.
Chair Janoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Hansen, or sorry, Commissioner Thomas has her hand up.
Commissioner Thomas, and I saw Commissioner Clark as well. Go ahead, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I agree with everything that you just said, Chair Janoff, and I also am support of a continuance. And I think that, and there are some cases where it might be difficult for the neighbors to articulate specific changes that they're asking for. And if that's the case and the applicant can bring that back to us, then like we've been in support of the project thus far, and we don't have any very specific feedback about changes, then I don't see why like we can't move on with a continuance. And I think that I have really appreciated Mr. Plett's ability to verbally communicate some of the questions and answer many of the questions that we've had, but it was difficult in person at the site and on paper to really visualize with these visuals that we have. And it was difficult for us to kind of, I mean, I think he was correcting us a couple of times and we were getting clarifications on things. And we spent a lot of time with these materials. So I think also getting some better renderings and having a better idea of what the mass and scale actually is on the property will hopefully put some of the, allow the neighbors to come to an agreement or feel more comfortable with the project moving forward. So I just wanted to say that I've appreciated the clarifications tonight. And I think that a few more things just need to be clarified and one last attempt to come to some agreement on a few things. So I'm in support of a continuance.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, Chair Janoff. Just a couple of additions to what was said. So I do agree that the outreach was not done to the extent that it needs to be. And it honestly sounds like the applicant wasn't aware that it's very important and normal to go door to door and actually talk to their neighbors. And so I do think it would be important to give them the opportunity to do that and to try to address those concerns with their neighbors, because it would be really sad to see relationships with neighbors hurt through this. And once the house goes up, just there being like resent around that. I think it would be nice to give them some time, see if there's anything that they're able to explain to neighbors. And then also maybe there are some really minor changes that they'd be able to make that would make other people feel a lot better. And so I agree, it helps the parking situation. It was built with a lot of intention and I like the design as it is, but I think that there should be more outreach before I'm comfortable approving it.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Clark. And I did want to just clarify that when we recommend further outreach, it doesn't need to be face-to-face. So if the applicant and neighbors are concerned regarding face-to-face communication given COVID, please make an attempt to provide phone numbers or emails. Phone numbers, it's so much better to talk than do the emailing thing. So you could certainly distribute a flyer to your neighbors and say, please give us a call. We'd like to hear from you. So again, it doesn't have to be face-to-face. It can be if you want to have a street meeting, that might be interesting. But having said that, do I have any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Tabana.
I just do I have a concern about continuing this tonight, just in the fact that it could open up. I want to see if we can maybe limit the scope to the continuance just to neighborhood outreach, as opposed to re-reviewing the whole entire project as a whole. I think that would be unfair to the applicants tonight. They came all this way to present to us. We've been discussing this for an hour and a half, and we just are going to continue it for a neighborhood outreach, which I do believe they did do. folks that we did here tonight are not part of the immediate neighborhood who have chimed in. So is there a way we can just limit the scope to the continuance tonight, is my question.
I think we can do that, staff.
You definitely can limit the scope to whatever is in the motion. That doesn't mean that that's all that may get discussed, but I think that direction might be helpful. Just so folks know where the commission is, if that's where they're interested in going.
Commissioner Hanson.
What my intent was by suggesting this, and I'll stop short of making the motion at the moment, was to limit the scope of this to simply to extending the neighborhood outreach to at least the 8 people that signed that letter, and anyone else that had written in, and anyone else that's in the neighborhood, immediate neighborhood that we define as we've defined it by the town residential design guidelines, if they haven't already been spoken to. And I'm not suggesting that they have to meet their requirements of those neighbors, but if there's something that's reasonable, I mean, I'll just give an example. If the neighbor just says, I don't think houses should exceed the FAR, and there's no harm that can be demonstrated because of it, that might not be a good feedback if that's in your opinion, but it isn't a harm that you're experiencing. So, what I would envision is, having some dialogue, doesn't have to be face-to-face, limited to the immediate neighborhood. And if I'm assuming that all the people that signed that letter were in the immediate neighborhood.
Thank you for that clarification. I would just like to add, for those who may not know, that the residential design guideline defines the immediate neighborhood as the 2 houses to the left and right of the property and the 5 houses across the street from the property. So those would be the primary outreach homes. I don't recall whether the 8 names on the letter were all on Olive or from other areas. So we would want the focus to be on those 2 to 5 houses in particular. And I think it's clear from the discussion tonight that the commission is generally in favor of the project as provided to us, but that we would like to see some renderings so we can get a better understanding of it. And that those renderings may help neighbors better understand what they're looking at over the story poles. So, and that we would not be expecting wholesale design changes. So these would be minor modifications that would help neighbors feel more comfortable with the design proposed. And with that, Commissioner Barnett.
Yeah, based on all the discussions that we've just heard, I would make a motion to continue this hearing for a period of 30 days or more to allow the applicant to reach out to the neighborhood, as has been described by Commissioner or Chair Janoff, and also that the additional elevations be provided. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hanson.
I second the motion.
Thank you for that. Any comments regarding the motion on the table? I don't see. Director Paulson.
I would just suggest that we do a date certain of February 9th. If they're not ready then we can continue it to the next meeting.
Does that modification to the motion, is that acceptable to the maker and the seconder of the motion?
It is to me.
It is, great. All right. With that, then, I don't see any hands raised to further discuss, so I'll call the question. By roll call vote, please indicate yes, no, or abstain. Commissioner Hanson.
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
And Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the motion to continue this matter for 30 days or to a date certain, as Director Paulson has provided, is approved. Director Paulson, there are no appeal rights for a continuance, are there?
That's correct. There are not.
All right, thank you. So at this time, it's 8:30. I don't know whether commissioners want to take a brief break or proceed on to our next item. Can I see a show of thumbs up to proceed? It looks like it's split. So let's take a quick 5-minute break and be back here at 8:35. So we will resume the planning commission meeting and move on to item number 3, which is requesting approval of a planned development for construction of a senior living community, removal of large protected trees and site improvements requiring a grading permit on property zoned RPD located at 110 Wood Road, APN 510-47038. Plan development application PD 20001 and environmental impact report EIR 21-002. Applicant Rockport Pacific, property owner Covia Communities, and the project planner is Sean Mullen. Are there any disclosures? And by a show of hands, may I see which planning commissioners have visited the property? Thank you for that. I understand, Mr. Mullen, you'll be giving the staff report tonight.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Before you tonight is a request for a recommendation to the Town Council for a proposed plan development ordinance and environmental impact report for construction of a new senior living community at 110 Wood Road, the current site of the Meadows Senior Community. The EIR was prepared to address potential significant impacts resulting from the project and concluded that all impacts could be mitigated to less than significant. The subject property is 10.8 acres, characterized by a hillside setting, but not located in the hillside area. The site is the home to the Meadows Senior Community, which operated from 1971 until 2019. The proposed plan development ordinance in front of you tonight would allow for the demolition of all existing buildings on the site, construction of a new full-service senior living community with 174 independent living units and 17 assisted living units, removal of 192 trees, including 8 large protected trees, and site improvements requiring a grading permit. The proposed senior community consists of a ground floor podium and 8 separate buildings, or villas as they're termed in the plans, constructed above the podium. The podium includes the main entrance to the facility, 17 supporting care units, dining facilities, offices, a fitness center, indoor swimming pool, mechanical areas, and 2 levels of indoor parking. An outdoor terrace would be located above the podium level, providing common space amongst the villas. The 8 villas would then rise 3 to 5 stories above the terrace level with heights from approximately 42 to 68 feet. The 8 villas would include the 174 1- and 2-bedroom independent living units with a variety of floor plans. A full description of the project architecture, including a summary of the review by the town's consulting architect, are included in your staff report. The proposed project is located primarily in the areas of the property with existing development. Excuse me. Site improvements are required for the new podium and villas, subterranean parking areas, adjustments to the site plan, and circulation improvements, including a new fire access ring road. Several new retaining walls are required throughout the site with heights from 3 to 24 feet. The primary function of the new retaining walls is to improve and extend fire access around the project site via the new ring road. As detailed in the staff report, the walls along the western edge of the development would be largely screened by the podium and villas, while those on the eastern edge may be more visible. The applicant has provided a discussion of their efforts to reduce wall heights and visibility in their letter of justification. This letter of justification does touch on many aspects of the project and provides a detailed summary of their public outreach efforts conducted since 2018. Based on the summary provided in the staff report, if the commission finds merit in the proposal, you can forward a recommendation to the town council to make the required findings, certify the final EIR, adopt the MMRP, or the Mitigated Monitoring Reporting Program, and adopt the plan development ordinance. An addendum and desk item to your staff report have been distributed, including additional materials from the applicant and additional public comment received after publishing the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Commissioner Hanson.
I have a question for staff. Since we have not seen a plan development proposal for a while, along with the EIR, are they supposed to be separate actions? There's the recommendation for the certification of the final EIR. There's the recommendation, the plan development ordinance, and then I think you mentioned also the recommendation on the mitigated monitoring report. Are those all independent actions, or are they one action?
I'm going to go ahead and defer to Joel, the director, for that question.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. So they are separate actions. So for instance, you could make the same recommendation for both the plan development and the actions necessary for the EIR. Or you could, as an example, recommend approval or recommend adoption and certification of the EIR, but recommend denial of the projects, or recommend the PD be approved with, modifications to the council. So, they are independent. So you could technically forward a recommendation that is different on both of those, depending on what the outcome of this discussion is by the planning commission.
Okay, and then if I might, Chair, ask a follow-up question. So there was a discussion also of the follow-up once the plan development ordinance and the EIR would be approved. Later on, there would be an architecture and site and some other permits that have to be issued. So is the architecture and site, since the proposed plan development ordinance already includes the height, the number of buildings, and we have the plans with the size of the buildings, what would the architecture and site cover?
The architecture and site application would require some additional information. For instance, the 8 villas in front of you this evening in your project plans don't, full elevations aren't included of all 8 villas. So it's an opportunity to make sure that we have all elevations of those buildings and verify that any project refinements made by the applicant fit within the framework of any approved PD ordinance.
So the PD ordinance would or would not include the height of the villas?
The PD ordinance would include the height of the villas. And in this case, I could say that this particular plan set included for the PD is quite robust. So there's kind of a fine line in between what's in front of us tonight and an architecture and site application. But it would include the height. It would include approximate grading quantities, retaining wall heights, the things that exceed what would normally be allowed under the zoning.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, were we to approve the PD, it would be approving the overall form and perhaps not the details that we are seeing tonight.
Any PD approval would include adoption of these development plans. So maybe that's a better answer to that question than my previous. And the architecture and site application would need to include a project or plans that are in substantial compliance with these development plans. That includes height of the buildings. Should there be slight shifts to the locations of buildings, staff would evaluate that as whether that's in substantial conformance or not. But the development plans would be adopted with the plan development.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions of staff at this time? Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I just have a quick clarification question. I believe that this would become the tallest building in Los Gatos, but I just wanted to fact check myself and see if you know if that's true.
Without 100% certainty, I could answer the question that I believe that would be true.
Thank you.
And thank you. I would just confirm that, yes, the buildings that are upwards of 85 feet would be taller than the Netflix buildings on Winchester, the newer ones that were most recently approved.
Thank you. And do you know how tall the Netflix buildings are by chance?
I believe they're approximately 75 feet, the tallest ones.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Raspy.
Just a kind of a technical question with respect to the scope of the EIR. In the materials we provided, I believe it states that with respect to the height issue, only views from public locations are part of the EIR and not any views from private locations. Is that accurate?
I believe that's accurate, and I think that dovetails into our previous discussion on the previous item from the town attorney about protected views. But yeah, I believe it's limited to the public areas.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
And and through the chair, I would also mention that our environmental consultants that prepared the environmental document are on hand should we have more specific questions about the EIR.
And one follow-up question then, as a result, any questions or comments we might have with respect to views from private areas would more properly be directed during the comments of the PD as opposed to the EIR then. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Yes, Commissioner Barnett.
Is it correct that we are making a recommendation to the town council on all of the issues that are on this matter? Or are some of them going to be definitive at this stage?
Your any decisions made tonight or at any future meetings would be a recommendation to the town council. They are the final deciding body.
Thank you. Any other questions? I did have one, and that is, I understand from the staff report that this is not considered a hillside parcel. Sure looks like hillside to me. Can you help us understand how this parcel is not in the hillside development area? I know we have maps. Is it just a matter of it being outside a map boundary?
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, and so at this time, I will open the public hearing and give the applicant up to 5 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
So I will allow Mr. Rockwood to speak. Mr. Rockwood, you can unmute yourself and you have up to 5.
Can you pull up the presentation deck? Great. Okay. All right. My name is Frank Rockwood. I'm with Rockwood Pacific, the applicant. I'm here on behalf of the owner, Covia Communities. Covia Communities is a nonprofit owner-operator of reputable senior living communities throughout California. Next slide, please. Our proposal is quite simply to rebuild a better Los Gatos Meadows. With the exception of the last line here, listed on this chart, we developed these design goals back in 2018. Please note, we are not proposing to increase the number of units, to increase the number of residents, the number of staff, or to change the use. Furthermore, note that our proposal materially mitigates issues related to parking, fire access, and fire safety. Next slide, please. The current facility was approved in 1968 and opened in 1971. Next slide, please. In conformance with industry's trends, and based on the results of focus group sessions conducted with local residents of Los Gatos, we are proposing a project that would have materially larger units and more amenity spaces than the existing facility. Where we're proposing a reduction in the number of units, given the strong demand and need for senior housing, we are proposing only a modest reduction in the number of units. Next slide, please. We have decided not to pursue an expansion of the development pad. And in fact, we have modestly reduced the development pad in several key areas. Given this decision, combined with the other constraints and goals, our proposal would entail a material increase in massing. Next slide, please. Our property is, next slide after that, please. Our property is proximate to numerous community resources. And while there are pros and cons in accommodating housing needs in any particular location in town, our project team strongly believes that this location is particularly well suited for a market rate senior community of the scale presented tonight. Next slide, please. As everyone is aware, vehicular traffic is particularly challenging in this part of Los Gatos. Our plan includes incorporating an on-demand self-driving vehicle system that will enable our residents and our staff to conveniently get to and from many resources proximate to our community without the use of their cars. Next slide, please. We have made and continue to make a strong investment in community engagement. We conducted our first open house session in March 2018, our 10th session this past Monday. While it is not practical for us to be fully responsive to every individual perspective, the project team has and continues to take all comments received into consideration. While there have been a wide range of comments and concerns, most of the comments we have received relate to visual impacts and construction impacts. With regard to construction, we plan to fully conform with the town standards, and as importantly, we are committed to a robust communication plan. Next slide, please. With regard to massing, we have tried to place and balance massing in a manner that, while clearly impacting some of our neighbors and the broader community, does so in a manner that we believe balances competing objectives and concerns. As the draft EIR analysis concludes, visual impacts are less than significant and are deemed incompatible with the general character of the hillside area. See impact 5.3. Please know that we are endeavoring to build and operate an exemplary senior community that will be a resource to the seniors of Los Gatos, as well as, I truly believe, on balance, a beneficial change for our neighbors and the wider community. In light of the benefits of our proposal and its alignment with several important general plan goals and policies, including housing policies, we're respectfully requesting your consideration, the Planning Commission's consideration of recommending approval of our project to the Town Council. This concludes my short presentation, and myself and my team is available to answer any questions the Commission may have. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Do commissioners have questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Hanson.
There was a time back in 2008 where this was brought in front of the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, which is not a requirement of any project, but is a service that our town offers. But it's often helpful to the Planning Commission and other deciding bodies to have that step. So we do have access to the packet and the minutes from that meeting. And while the plans may have changed somewhat since then, it looks like there's less units than there was before. But one of the things that that was mentioned was it would be important to have a certain amount of below market rate housing because we're under requirements with the state of California to have some level of affordable housing. So could you comment on to what extent there will be affordable housing in this proposal?
Okay. Yeah. So can everyone can hear me fine, right? Okay. So I'd like to point out that Covia does have a rather significant affordable housing division, but Covia does not and never has offered below market units or affordable market units in any of its continuing care retirement communities. And please note, as we've indicated on page 2 of our justification letter, that state law specifically prohibits the imposition of rent regulations on CCRCs. In consultation with Perkins Coie, our counsel, we believe that this state law applies to our project. I'd also like to observe that we are not proposing to increase the number of units or staffing, employees, et cetera, from our current approvals.
Okay, well, so no one has said you're required to do that. I just was asking the question if you had taken that under consideration, because that was a comment made by the CDAC back in 2008. And had you brought it to the CDAC more recently, probably would have come up again. I have a follow-up question related to the same conversation. During that same CDAC meeting, it was at that time as well a proposal to go 5 stories, which is unprecedented for the most part in Los Gatos, even as of today. And to what extent you consider that feedback that was brought up by the CDAC back in 2008, that it would be a very difficult thing for the town to even consider anything that tall. And when you made your proposal.
Right. Yeah, so I can say that we studied and thoroughly the feedback from CDAC, and we did consider all the comments. We did consider balancing the objectives. So, for instance, there was comments about not expanding the development pad. There were comments about kind of maintaining housing supply. So we tried to balance those, and we tried to balance the density. Yes, we do have buildings of 5 stories, but we do believe there's kind of merit in kind of keeping the housing supply, not reducing the housing supply any further than we are proposing to do here.
Okay, thank you. If I might, Chair, I had one more question.
Go ahead.
And so the other question I had was about the excavation, the cut and fill. Now, this project is not in the hillside for purposes of the hillside standards and design guidelines. So you wouldn't be subject to the guideline of the limit on the cut and fill, but there is a need for a grading permit. And, you know, it did give me pause to see that we would require a grading permit for 50 cubic yards, yet we're looking at a net of 140,000, I think is what I read in the staff report. So I just wondered if you could comment on where the 140,000 of cut, because this is still our hillsides, even if it's not subject to the hillside design guidelines. What are the things that are driving that? I'm sure part of it is the fire department, and maybe part of it's a subterranean garage, but could you maybe break down where that 140,000 is going to come from?
Yeah, and I guess maybe this is a question for Joel. Is this something I could have one of my team members kind of jump in? So there's Mark Falga with Kimley Horn. I'm going to hand that question off to him. If that's possible or practical.
It is possible. 1 second. Mark, you are now able to speak if you unmute yourself.
Hi, Mark Falgo, Kimley Horn, civil engineer. Nearly all of that excavation is coming from the subterranean garage, and the fact that we are tucking this building into the hillside on the back side of the building. So all that, in order to keep the heights down as low as we possibly can, and to get all the parking off of the surface area and onto the site, the excavations required in order to do the subterranean garage and to nestle the building into the hillside.
Okay, so none of it is related to the fire access road then?
Well, that's the fire access roads are not contributing to that much cut. That's more the keeping the building elevation down and getting the parking taken care of.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That is my questions for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have questions? Yes, Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. I want a little more information on what you were saying about affordable housing. So you said that Covia has a robust affordable housing division, but that you've never had any BMR units in anything that you've built. And so can you clarify what the affordable housing division is doing then? And then also just state whether or not there will be any affordable units in this complex.
Okay, can you hear me now, or do I need to get back signed in?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so first of all, to clarify, Covia has built, operate, and own many affordable housing units, but those are what I would call more traditional housing. The existing community here, the community that we're proposing to rebuild, is what we characterize as a continuing care retirement community, also called the light plan community. And so that typically involves an entry fee, and it involves substantial services, meal services, social services, health services, et cetera. So it's a different model, and it's a model that's service intensive. And so, yes, Covia has never had any below market rate units or affordable units in any of their continuing care retirement communities, but they do have communities that usually are exclusively focused on serving an affordable housing population.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And so then I do want to ask, I know that it's not something that anybody can require of you, but it's definitely been a really big community concern lately, and definitely in the town of Los Gatos is something that we're working on. Would you be open to putting any BMR units in this build?
So unfortunately, it's very, very challenging because we don't have, so, if you think of traditional housing, you can have a range of units, and you can set aside a couple of units that are small, or just set aside, hey, just a fraction of units that are affordable. The service component is so heavy, and we've never kind of segmented out, hey, there's different tiers of, fundamentally different tiers of service. So everyone kind of that moves into the community gets, the same meals, very high quality meal services and social services and health services as everybody else. So again, it's not something that Covia has ever done, and they quite frankly don't really think it would work in a CCRC environment.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Just a follow-up question. The CCRC environment that you're describing is one business model of operating a senior community, and there are others that don't require the same kind of entry fee and also don't provide the continuing care.
Right.
If the business model were a different senior community business model that wasn't the buy-in kind of model, would any other business model, and I don't mean to be so far ranging, but is there another business model for a senior community that would allow for or would enable below market rate units to be incorporated?
Yeah, I guess the short answer is absolutely yes. I mean, it could be just a traditional housing project. It could be an affordable housing project. Obviously, there's a whole range of different models that we're not talking about.
I'm speaking specifically of a senior community where you have rental units and you do provide meals. We have many of these in our wider community.
Right.
They're not a CCRC model.
Right.
The question is, would those accommodate a below market rate unit?
Yes, they could potentially accommodate a affordable unit, but that's not what we're proposing. That's kind of not all it could be as properties that are not strictly affordable housing communities are continuing care retirement communities.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Thomas, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do. I have a question for the applicant just about the community outreach that you did with regard to the focus group and what the community needed. When did that occur? And could you just elaborate a little bit on how many individuals you talked to and what feedback you provided?
Yeah, if you want to, you could pull up slide number 8. I can talk off of that. So we've had 10 open house sessions to date. We either mailed and eventually over time we received emails from our neighbors. We used the same mailing distribution. We actually had a political consulting working with us early on, procured a mailing list that aligns with the notice mailing provision for these types of meetings.
Mr. Rockwood, I'm sorry. I think that I didn't ask my question clearly.
Okay.
I meant with that, not with necessarily with the community outreach to the immediate neighborhood. I meant with you said that you conducted some focus groups and talked to people in town about the needs.
Yeah. Okay. We actually hired a consulting firm that specializes in focus groups.
Okay.
And so they actually controlled the mailing list. Majority of the participants in those focus groups were from Los Gatos, but some were from communities immediately in the area, immediately adjacent to Los Gatos. We hosted several sessions actually in the Toll House conference rooms. And so they were basically all day sessions where we inquired about all kinds of preferences as part of kind of to guide our programming for our proposed rebuild project.
Okay. And then when did those, what were the dates of those? I mean, just broadly, like how long?
So that was in October 2018.
Okay. October 2018.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a follow-up question on the community outreach. Since the story polls have gone up, there's been a lot of community input regarding the visible height, particularly those seen from the downtown area. Can you comment on whether you've had any communication with the community at large regarding the impact of the story polls, post-story poll installation?
We've had meetings with our neighbors post story pole installation. So in fact, our last open house meeting was Monday. We haven't had meetings with the broader community. I'm not sure how we would do that, but yes, so we've met with our neighbors post the installation of the story poles.
All right, thank you. And just going back to your original presentation, you mentioned that you believe that this proposed plan development will be a resource for seniors in Los Gatos. That's a pretty broad statement. It led me to wonder whether any portion of this community would be open to seniors who are not residents. And I don't mean guests, but residents of Los Gatos.
So I'm hopefully I'm tracking the question. So we will in no way, shape or form discriminate who moves into the community based on where they're moving from. But it is our experience that most people that move into these types of communities are moving from the area. So we do expect a significant majority of the residents to be prior residents, to have a prior residence in the town of Los Gatos. Am I answering your question?
Not precisely. You said that this would be a resource to seniors in Los Gatos. You're talking about, if I'm not putting words in your mouth, what you're really saying is that this is a place where residents of Los Gatos can find senior housing, but you're not saying that it's broadly a community area that other seniors who are residents of town and not residents of the community would be able to come and enjoy the park-like setting or any amenities that you might have.
I'm going to ask Chris Echian, who's an executive with Covia, to elaborate on that question. So I think he needs to raise his hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, my name is Chris Echian. I was executive director there for 5 years before we closed down in 2019, and currently with Covia in the operations side. So if the questions regarding this is our communities, a place where the public can come and gather, the answer to that would probably be no, since it's a private property. As you can probably imagine, similar to like the terraces of Los Gatos, lots of neighbors and families and friends and children go to those communities, but they're usually invited guests. Since this is a private residence of our guests, which it would be and historically has been, it wouldn't be open to the public to come and go as they please. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes, I did have a follow-up question to that, and I was wondering if Covia had any data from some of their other sites about the percent of residents that move into the community, about like how far they lived before, if they have any data about like, have they moved in from the same zip code, what percent comes from farther away zip codes, etc.
I'm going to ask Mary McMullen to respond to this question. So she's executive with Covia. So she will raise her hand.
Yes, I'm unmuted. My name is Mary McMullen. I'm Chief Advancement Officer with Covia. And our market research has showed that typically in excess of 60% of the residents are local within a 5 to 10 mile radius, and it's usually more on the 5 mile radius side. The additional residents of the community, 30 to 40%, come primarily for a relationship with someone local. In other words, parents of local residents, people who lived prior in Los Gatos who are returning in retirement, or people who view this as a destination because they have a tie to the area. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that. One last question before we go to Commissioner Raspy. In the public outreach recently, since the story polls have gone up, have you heard any feedback from anyone within the immediate neighborhood? Of course, they're concerned about the height and its impact on their property. Have they also indicated the concern about height as it appears from the story polls or from your renderings from downtown? Have you addressed the height concerns of the downtown views?
Yes, I guess I will relay that some of the comments have related not only to personal views, but to views from other parts of town. And in terms of, again, we feel like we've done a lot of work in balancing where that massing goes, and we understand that there are some impacts from some perspectives of the massing. But yeah, the answer is yes, we have gotten such comments.
But in your work in addressing those comments, the consideration of reducing the overall height of your buildings has not been an alternative that you've chosen.
That is correct. We have not explored those alternatives at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Raspy.
Yes, thank you. I was hoping the applicant could address briefly the traffic issues that we would expect from the new project, how it would vary from its predecessor, including the changes in the ingress and egress to the project, and also its impacts on fire life safety as well.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Mark Falgot to take point on this. And then, Mark, I'm just going to heads up, if you want, there's slides 50, 51, 50, and 51 that may help provide backup on the traffic analysis. And then,
Okay. If you'd like to display those slides, that would be great. But starting from an access standpoint for fire safety.
and that's actually on 24. So if you go to slide 24, is the best slide to speak off of for fire.
Yeah. Well, here's the whole circulation. So as I believe everybody probably knows, the Farwell Lane does currently connect from Wood Road to Broadway as a private road. But at the rear of the existing site, that's a dead end road with a turnaround at the end of it. So from a fire access standpoint, we are looping the circulation so that fire can circulate throughout the site. And we are going to allow emergency vehicle access from Broadway for fire and other emergency vehicles, but not regular day-to-day operations. Day-to-day operations will be in and outs will be is depicted by the blue line for where folks will come in off of Wood Road, pull into the valet area, and the valet will go and park their car in the underground garage. So that's the main change in circulation is simply that the Farwell Lane will not be used by the site for vehicular access. Typically, it's just going to be emergency vehicle. Now we are open to should there be some reason that the neighbors up the hill would need to use Farwell to get out in an emergency situation, that would be available for neighbors up the hill. This came out of this looping action on the access road came out of a lot of coordination with the fire department. So we're not only looping the road, but we're also widening the road to at least 20 feet. And it's 26 feet in many cases, so that they have room to set up aerial apparatus, so that they can access the roofs to serve the site. From a traffic numbers standpoint, the project is there. When compared to the existing site, we did take some traffic counts in 2018, and when compared to the existing site, the peak daily trips will go up minimally 10 trips per day, which is a very small amount. But the peak hour trips will actually decrease, and the reason for that is they're just a slightly different use from the ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers handbook for determining trip counts. And so the peak hour will go down because the peak times for those daily trips does adjust. So from a traffic standpoint, the peak hour trips will actually be decreased. And we're talking about total, I believe that, and I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but we're talking about approximately less than 30 trips per peak hour, which means that there is that's a trip every 30 seconds. So we're not talking about a very steady stream of flow of traffic coming out of these things during the peak hours. Hopefully I answered the question, but if I missed something, please let me know and I'll try and speak to it.
Just one follow-up. It sounds like the traffic patterns, or at least the traffic volume, won't shift dramatically, but the fact that you're using Wood exclusively, does that mean there's going to be more traffic on Wood as opposed to what there was on Wood previously?
Well, we did not study, we didn't take volumes of vehicles that are coming out, but that was where the point that at peak hour, utilizing wood only, we would be putting a car every 30 seconds on wood. So there's plenty of space between cars that it wouldn't become a backup.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Commissioner Hanson.
I had a follow-up question based on the question about traffic. And this is more about the, the construction phase. And I realize that's a time-limited thing. It's not an ongoing thing, and it's not something you typically, worry about over the long term. But since there would be, under this proposal, 140,000, actually more coming out than that even, how long and how many truckloads would that be during the construction phase?
I do not know the estimated number of trucks offhand. Mark, I don't know if you do. We certainly can. Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't have the estimate offhand, but I will say that the route would be from Wood Road directly to 17, even if that meant that the trucks would have to drive the wrong way on 17 and turn around in order to get to their destination, so that we would avoid or minimize our impact on any city streets.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, I thought of it because we had some construction on my own street, and they were putting subterranean square footage, and this was only dozens of cubic yards, and it was probably 2 weeks of trucks every half hour, all day long. So it's good to know that they would be not going through our streets. So
yes.
All right, thank you for that, Commissioner Clark.
I have a question and then a follow-up to that. I remember seeing this somewhere, I think, but I couldn't find it. How many of the units will be 2 bedrooms and how many will be 1 bedroom?
Okay, pull out the slide deck and go to slides for that. Hold on. Slide 41. Slide deck 41 will show you a detailed breakout of the unit types that we're proposing. So the breakout is such. Roughly 2/3 are 2 bedrooms, and 1/3 1 bedrooms, no studios. And that's in alignment with the focus groups sessions that we had. It's also in alignment with our experience. We actually had few 2-bedroom units and not that many 2-bedroom units in the existing facility. Always had a long waiting list. And we'd actually have studio units that would go vacant for years.
And can you try to shed some light on why that is? Because it was my gut reaction that seniors are empty nesters. They usually don't have roommates. They're retired and wouldn't theoretically need a second office or anything. And so do you know why that is?
I'm going to ask Mary McMullen to take point on that question.
Yep, I'm unmuted. So as people age, the idea that they want to downsize radically is actually proving false with each successive generation. So prior years when we would develop communities, they would be studios or small 1-bedroom apartments. In reality, people as they retire and downsize today feel a 2-bedroom apartment is a major downsizing. They still want to be able to have room for family to visit. They want to be able to have an office. They want to be able to have spare space that is not immediately lived in all the time, or they want to be able to construct a home to allow for leisure space, workspace, workout space, you name it. So the 2-bedroom apartment has really become very standard in housing as people age, because that is really how they choose to live.
Thank you.
And a follow-up question to that, if I might. 2 bedrooms might be the standard, but a 2,200 square foot, I guess that's your penthouse. So you could go back to the other slide, we could see the square footage. Square footage seems quite generous in terms of overall space.
Yeah, again, it is response to market demands. As people downsize out of a single family house, our apartments offer anywhere from 40 to say 80% of the space they experience in the house prior to this. They don't want to or what the experience in the market, as well as the focus groups and the market research has shown, is they want to be able to have their furniture, their treasures, their special pieces with them. They want to be able to live in a way that allows for entertaining and allows for visits. And so given the size of local homes, given the focus group work, given the market research, the square footage does reflect the desire of the market.
And a follow-up question, I think it's reasonable to say that there are multiple steps in a downsizing process for a senior, and it often comes to the point where they want to downsize further. They may have the 2-bedroom now, but they want to go down to a 1-bedroom or a studio because they no longer have their spouse, or they no longer have the possessions or the ability to do the hobbies that they have. The configuration of your design looks to me as though it has minimal move down opportunity for seniors who might be part of the community and want to move into a smaller space and stay within the community of friends and amenities that they've been accustomed to. Can you speak to that?
We do have the opportunity for people to move to the 1-bedroom or 1-bedroom with den apartments on campus. Again, this is something that we have found in our decades of experience, that people do choose to move down, but the numbers of people who do that is very small as a percentage of the total resident body. That the preference is to stay in the apartment of origin. And then if they should choose to seek healthcare, we do have the 17 care suites, which are smaller. Those are studio type homes. But we do have 1-bedroom and 1-bedroom with den homes that people could downsize to on campus.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Clark. And then Commissioner Burnett.
I just want to dig a little bit deeper on some of your responses about meeting market demands. And so in terms of it being 2 bedrooms to meet that and the sizing to meet that, I live in a 2-bedroom, pretty big, I think, apartment, and it's 900 square feet. And so I think I want to ask, like, when you talk about that, it feels like you're speaking to a pretty wealthy and like luxury focused sort of group. So where, like, what are you talking about when you talk about market desires and like general community desires like that?
I have to say, Commissioner, this is a fairly affluent opportunity for retirement. So given that, yes, our product size is to meet the needs of people who have owned homes in the Los Gatos area, who have had property, who have raised families in homes. And frankly, as a result of the success in general of the Los Gatos area, those home values are very strong, and that enables people to trade the equity in their house for lifelong security through a continuing care or life plan community. So yes, frankly, it is geared to a successful, financially successful market.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, I actually have 6 questions, and I'm not sure whether the order should be sequential or intermixed with other comments from the commissioners. The one question I wanted to start with is relating to the plan development and height of the buildings, which is a concern for the community. And if I counted right, there are on the 5-story buildings, there's only 19 units, which would, if they were eliminated, would reduce the project by as much as perhaps 11%. And my question is, I thought I saw a comment about what's economically feasible for this project. And so the question is, if 11% of the units were eliminated, would the project still be economically viable?
Great. So we can take them one at a time. I thought you were going to give me 6 questions at once. I was going to have to. You know, unfortunately, it's not kind of black or white, you know, what works and what doesn't work. I mean, there's a lot of estimates that we make in the course of pursuing these projects. And, you know, some of those estimates, you know, vary as time goes on in terms of how they actually turn out. So it's almost more of a probabilistic answer. So yeah, if we eliminate 1 unit, 2 units, ever many units as that go from being viable to not being viable, no, that's not the way we look at it, but it starts to become, it does start to stress the project and makes it, you know, just less likely that we'll be able to kind of get through the feasibility gate and kind of get financing and move forward. So it's a long way of saying that, no, I don't think reducing the project by a handful of units would necessarily put it in a completely different category, but it would worsen the probability to some degree.
Chair Janoff, I don't know how you want to proceed with my additional questions. I'll defer to you.
What I would suggest, unless these are specifically, well, I think the discussion that we're having now is both informative to the commission and it's also informative to the audience who are potential speakers. And so if you believe that the questions that you have would further augment that knowledge so that the speakers would have additional information to work from, then I would say ask the questions. If these are questions that would better be a wrap up in terms of suggested alternatives, then I would say let's hold that until we hear from the public.
Well, from my perspective, they're all important and could relate to community input.
All right, then proceed.
So the draft CEQA findings identify 205 protected trees and 8 large protected trees that are proposed for removal based on the arborist report. And my question is, are all those intended to be addressed by new plantings or will they be in lieu fees? And if so, can you estimate the percentage of one versus the other?
Okay. I'm going to ask David Gates to take point on this question. So he will raise his hand.
David, you're unmuted. You can speak.
All right, Dave Gates, landscape architect on the project team. We hired an arborist to go out and study the trees surrounding the building, which they did, and there was a minority report from the city arborist in concert. And our intent, it's an oak woodland, basically, which had a lot of invasive trees and a lot of suspect trees from a fire point of view and structural point of view. So the trees being removed are, in most cases, structurally damaged and fired suspect trees. There are some trees that will be removed for construction, so those are also gone. So our intent, to answer your question, is to put in a lot of specimen trees. What you're seeing in the simulations now is a simulation with existing trees, and we will come back in and mitigate some of those views, and we will bring back specimen oaks. And most cases, there are numbers in the tree report of what the mitigation costs would be for those trees. We will probably exceed that by, you know, I don't know how, by 300 or 400% coming in with the specimen trees. We aren't to that level yet, but I would guess we will be substantial in the bringing in nice specimen oak trees, particularly the evergreen oaks, which will do a better job in screening. So quick answer is we will probably exceed by 3 to 5 times the cost of the mitigation price for the trees removed. And we'll bring in the species in an appropriate way from a fire perspective with defensible space and all the other criteria, which the species there now do not serve us well.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I have a major concern about the parking at the project with active seniors. I expect that the 78 non-tandem spaces in the parking structure will be grossly inadequate. And I saw that you had an alternative suggested possibly of having a valet that would allow 222 cars to be parked there, which would allow, I think, as I calculated, 79% of the residences to be accommodated with at least one car. So I wonder if you could comment on whether the suggestion of a valet could be made as a part of the condition of the plan development, or whether that's something that you want to keep in a flexible state.
Okay, I'd like to kind of refer to slides number 43 and 44 in responding to this question. Hold on one second here. Just gonna get one stat here. So the existing community, and again, similar scale in terms of the number of units, number of residents, number of staff, had on site 130 parking spaces. And we actually had a valet operation, with the prior operation. That was insufficient. We actually had an arrangement with the toll house to rent some of the less than 20 parking spaces there. And we had staff that would actually use the town parking at the foot of Wood Road. So next slide. So we are looking to substantially increase the number of parking spaces from what we had previously, and we're looking to eliminate all the parking that would be kind of outside of the garage. So we do think that this meets the requirement. And then yes, in terms of valet, again, that's something that we did previously. That's something we anticipate doing, and we certainly would not have an issue with that being a requirement imposed on this project.
Okay, thank you very much. On reflection, I think I'll continue the questioning after the public input.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Clark.
I just have one last question. I was wondering, was any outreach done specifically to potential residents of Los Gatos Meadows?
Short answer is yes. So that focus group that we mentioned, all of the folks that were invited to participate in that process were effectively potential residents. There's a timing issue. So it'll be some time in the best case before we would actually be able to accommodate any of those residents moving in. But they certainly were kind of chosen based on being candidates to be and move into this community in this location.
Okay, great. Yeah, like theoretically fit the demographic. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that it was as much a focus group as it was a marketing meeting, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to let Mary McMullen take point on that question.
Hi, it's Mary again. It is a marketing opportunity, but first and foremost, it's a survey opportunity to make sure that we're designing a product that is applicable in the market. So there were a number of questions asked that were iterative, so that as people answered, we could work off of those responses and take that into consideration with development. We used a list of people who would financially qualify. We could obtain a similar list for marketing. We did not retain that list of people specifically from the focus group for future marketing.
And actually, I'd like to make one more comment along here that I think it will address this question. So if you go to slide.
Sorry,
11.
Mr. Rockford, my question's been answered.
Okay, great.
By Ms. McMullen. So
Okay.
if there are no further questions from commissioners, I think it's a good time to move on to the opening it for members of the public who would wish to speak. Director Paulson, do we have anyone who wishes to speak on this matter?
We do. The first speaker will be Julie.
Hello, this is Julie. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. I am a neighbor of Wood Road, and I have attended almost all of the open houses of the Meadows. I've lived on the hill for over 30 years, and I love the Meadows as a neighbor. Very happy that the story poles have gone up so that the neighbors and myself can see a little bit more of what's going on. I still support the Meadows project, but I do have some items that I didn't get in by the timeline this morning for Sean, so that's why I'm speaking now. The first item was that once the story poles went up, they did clearly show a bit more bulk than what we were anticipating. The second item is that we're very happy to hear that they are proposing or thinking about solar, though we hope that it doesn't add much to the height. Third item is parking. More parking is good for the workers, but it will add more traffic regardless of what I think any traffic study may have done. Before they closed, the workers that parked off-site walked up the road. Fourth item, wood roading is getting lots of attention by people on foot and by car, especially that the flags are up. Many are driving to the top end of Wood Road and are coming back down, turning around in people's driveways, et cetera, and really adding to the traffic flow. This is really giving us a flavor of what's going to happen once the project takes off. This also exasperates the fact that there is only a sidewalk a few feet up the road. It might be nice to have some sort of sidewalk or street marking where bikes or people could walk safely when they rebuild and after they have successfully built. I do understand from the open house that a sidewalk may be out of the question due to tree roots and things of that nature, but I wanted to voice my interest. Fifth item, this also leads to my consistent request that the Meadows community have heard me say at almost every open house meeting, is the closing off of the Broadway exit to neighbors. I do understand the theory, but in the open houses, they say it's because when people go down the Falwell Lane, they don't want to hit pedestrians on the sidewalk. Well, we don't even have a sidewalk on Wood Road, and we have to walk in the road when we're going up and down to our houses as it is today. So, you know, the three items that I have to that is that Falwell that current Broadway exit in front of the Meadows before they closed, it saved our house it saved us during the 1997 fire. My house personally burnt down during that period of time, but traffic was able to come and go from that. Also,
Ms. Duthernight, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you, but your time has expired.
Thank you.
Do commissioners have any questions for Ms. Southern? I don't see any hands raised. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hanson.
I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind submitting your comments in writing, even though you were able to speak at the meeting tonight, because it would be good to have that as we move forward and in working with this project. Would you be able to do that?
I believe I did submit them to Sean, but I missed the deadline at 11
Oh, you missed the deadline.
I think
Okay,
I got them in at 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, because your comments are very helpful, as are all comments from the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Director Paulson, do we have anyone else wishing to speak?
We do. The next speaker will be Mr. Conrad.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
I'm the current chair of the Community Health and Senior Services Division and Commission in Los Gatos, and we recently completed a survey of service providers to deliver ARPA funds. And in doing so, there was a lot of concern among the service providers that there are people who want to stay in Los Gatos but can't afford it. And so I just urge you to consider affordability in your actions as you go forward. Also, I'm a member of the service committee that's currently doing an extensive survey of seniors in Los Gatos in January, and that data should be available soon, and it might be of use to everyone on the commission. That's all I have to say. Again, good luck, and let's get affordable housing for seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any hands raised. Thank you very much. Director Paulson, do we have any other individuals wishing to speak?
We do. The next speaker will be Andy.
Hi, this is Andy Gofrani. I live on 121 Wood Road on the hill directly behind the proposed development. My property has the largest visual impact by the mass of the proposed construction. And this is per the admission of the developer and the landscape architect that I've discussed. Per the EIR, as I understand, the 85-foot building heights are 35 foot more than the 50-foot original elevation. So this essentially is a 35-foot vertical reduction in my view of town and the East Hills, which is replaced by buildings across my site. As proposed, these villas, the villas farthest to me and closer to town are higher than the villas in front of me. I would like to ask the building masses to be redistributed more evenly and reduce the visual impact from my side if possible. Since we live on a hill and don't have a front yard, my front deck acts as my yard, and this has a major effect on my view, as I mentioned. Per my conversation with Mr. Rockwood and Gates, this change or proposed change should not be visible from the town's point of view, which sits at the lower angle and won't have an additional impact to what's shown in the current plans. The second comment I had is about the truck traffic. I am in construction business myself, so once I heard the 140,000 cubic yards of excavation volume and using a 10-wheeler trucks, which carry about 10 yards, that will be 14,000 trucks. And if you have the 14,000 trucks in 6 months, you'll have about 15 trucks an hour, going through Wood Road. So we have to deal with that. And I wanted Julie to hear that too as a neighbor. We're neighbors, and this is something new to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and for clarifying what 140,000 square foot of dirt removal would entail in terms of truck trips. Any other comments or questions or quick questions from commissioners? I don't see any hands raised. Director Paulson, is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time?
I don't see any other hands raised. Let's give it a minute. If anyone else from the public would like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. I don't see any other hands raised, Chair.
All right, then we'll now close the public hearing on this item and ask if any commissioners have questions of staff, wish to comment on the application, or introduce a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. We need to re-invite the applicant back for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. See, don't have many. Well, I do want to make one point regarding kind of our community outreach and regarding the marketing question. So if you go to slide 11, and then also I'd like to kind of point out that in our justification letter, we have a comprehensive list of kind of all of our communications with neighbors over the last several years. We have been maintaining a project website since 2018. I encourage everybody and anyone that has any interest in this project to go into this website. You can just actually, there's the web address, but if you just Google Los Gatos Meadows, this should come up. We post on this website, we have a video summary of our project proposal that really stresses the architecture. We have video on that website that talks about this self-driving vehicle system, but we update the frequently asked questions on a regular basis. And that includes contact information and links to the town's website, et cetera. We do frequently, about once a month, we do get marketing inquiries. So we have been keeping track of real prospects of folks that have indicated that they do want to live in this community and they want to be appraised of updates. So just wanted to get that point across. And then just one minor thing on the sidewalk on Wood Road, I just want to clarify that as part of the draft conditions, we are obligated to install a sidewalk on Wood Road up to our property, up to the entrance of our property. So just wanted to clarify that. And then that's it. I'm gonna hand it back to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rockwood. Do commissioners have any additional questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, I had a few additional points to make or questions to ask here. The letter of Mr. Rockwood to Commissioner Hanson on January 26th on page 13 says the applicant will either use the LEED or Greenpoint rating system. But later in that letter, it indicates that there might be a choice already of the Greenpoint. And I was wondering if you'd agree that the LEED process is more rigorous than the Greenpoint.
Yeah, I'm gonna let our Arch Pelly kind of address that question. So,
can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is whether Covia tends to use the LEED or the Greenpoint rating system.
We the LEED rating system is actually outpaced by your California code because it's much more strict than the LEED. We could use LEED, it requires verification, but because the California code is more strict than LEED, we just usually fall back on the California code.
I see, okay, that's very helpful. And then one other question. There's a point in the letter of Mr. Rockwood dated July 9, 2021 regarding the need for a 10-foot setback from drainage features during tree removal, demolition, and construction activities. And the comment stated that additional information would be provided after consultation with the project team as to whether government agency approvals would be required. And I was wondering what the outcome of that was.
So I'm sorry, could I ask you to repeat the question? So it has to do with
a required 10-foot setback from site drainage features during tree removal, demolition, or construction activities.
I think that was kind of a wetland issue, staying away from a wetland condition. So Mark, I think that would be you. Mark Balgett.
This applies at the back of the site. There's a drainage that runs down the hill that we have pulled back. It drains into an existing inlet and it's then piped off the site, and we've pulled back any work for at least 10 feet away from that in order to meet that requirement.
Okay, so the government agency approvals will not be necessary, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Commissioner Barnett. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Thomas.
I just have a follow-up question about the LEED versus just the like Cal Green or whatever it's called, our state standards. Are there any plans to
just FYI, I lost audio contact, so if you could repeat that.
We have lost audio as well. Commissioner Thomas, if you can hear us, we can't hear you.
It appears that she's frozen.
All right. Let's ask the question I think Commissioner Thomas was intending to ask, and that is, well, actually, I don't know what she was going to ask for that matter. So let's not put words in her mouth. And if she rejoins us, then perhaps that's a question that can be asked of staff. If there are no other questions of commissioners, Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I just have a question regarding the tree removals. And so I know that there are a variety of reasons for removing all of those different trees, but 8 of the trees that you're planning to remove are large protected. And that's definitely not something that I take lightly. Those trees take 100 years or more to grow, and you can't plant a 100-year-old tree. And the reasoning I noticed for 5 of the 8 was for construction. So I wanted to ask what efforts you made to preserve trees. Like during my site visit, I noticed a lot of them were incorporated into the existing facility. And did you try to do that in any way to preserve some trees?
Okay. So I'd like to speak to that, and then also have Mark Falga speak to that. So I just emphasize that one of the reasons we decided to keep the development pad, to not expand the development pad, was because of impact on trees. And most of the tree removal, because we're keeping the same development pad, it turns out a majority of the, well, I'll let Mark speak to it, but a lot of the tree removal requirements are really being driven by fire access. So we really have a bad current situation in terms of fire accessibility. Mark, I'll have you speak to that.
Okay, and then so some of the ways that we tried to limit yes, we had to widen the roads, but for instance, at the back of the site, we're using the uphill edge of the road as our limit and widening it into the site so that we're not affecting the trees that are up the hill. And we're not going to grade up the hill to daylight. We're going to build walls to really minimize the grading impact, because grading obviously is going to impact trees. So that was a major focus in the site design, was how do we preserve these trees. And quite frankly, we did the same thing on the downhill side, where we did have to widen the roads to meet fire access requirements. But we're using walls in order to minimize the grading down the hill where those 2 cottages are now, so that we can preserve the trees that are down there instead of impacting them. So there was quite a bit of thought that went into how can we really minimize our footprint. And I think the whole idea that Frank mentioned of trying to design inside the existing footprint, as well as the way that we tried to minimize the grading outside of that footprint, have spoken to that. Now, as the design progressed and our discussions with fire continued, we did have to expand in order to make sure that we got the loop along the north edge that they were going to require.
Yeah, I think I would have liked to see some more effort to incorporate those trees that are on the property into the design, but I appreciate you shedding light on the efforts that you made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Barnett.
Actually, I have one more, and this will be it. Apparently not required by CEQA, but I am concerned about the safety at the intersection of Wood Road and the off-ramp and on-ramp to Highway 17. And I was wondering if you had considered whether any traffic mitigation could be offered at that site, such as a stoplight or a roundabout.
Yeah, so my quick response is we are willing to contribute our fair share contribution to any of those types of improvements. And Mark, maybe you should potentially, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that's, I don't think I have anything to add.
Thank you, that's appreciated.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? I don't see any hands raised. So at this time, I will now close the public hearing on this item and ask if any commissioners have questions of staff, wish to comment on the application, or introduce a motion for consideration. Commissioner Raspy.
Yeah, actually, before we have too much discussion, I had a quick question for staff, and I'm not sure it can be answered now or if it takes a little research, and it's specifically for town attorney. I know that applicants' counsel has opined that the affordable housing laws are inapplicable to this particular development. But before we proceed with that understanding, I'd like maybe a second opinion from town, whether there is a requirement to provide affordable housing in this development. I think it would be an important thing to know as we proceed.
And I completely agree with the statements made by the applicant that they are exempt from it.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Commissioner Tavana, then Commissioner Hanson.
I'll be brief here. Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about this plan development, specifically regarding to building height and the sheer number of trees being removed. Well, there are only 8 large protected trees, but if you go to the tree inventory table, there are a host of protected trees. While not all of them are large protected, but they are rather large trees. And I just don't know how that will look in terms of the viewing from like a hillside perspective. Secondly, as part of a plan development, and going back to the 2020 general plan, it says the PD overlay zone is intended to ensure orderly planning and quality design that will be in harmony with the existing or potential development of the surrounding neighborhood. So in looking at these plans and just the story poles, I don't see how it blends with the entire surrounding neighborhood.
All right, thank you for those comments. Commissioner Hanson?
You know, I have mixed feelings on this one. Certainly, there is a need for additional senior housing. I mean, we all know that there's big, long waiting lists at the terraces for certain kinds of units. But on the other hand, we have also seen quite a number of people come into town and are starting to want to build senior facilities. So I guess where I come out on this is, you know, I was on the plan development study committee when we were looking at the plan development ordinance, and, you know, the applicant did mention about, you know, providing a public benefit. So the main public benefit that I see out of this is for the most affluent people in Los Gatos in the big houses, you know, to have something that they can move down to that's easier to step down to than something that's smaller. But what we're not providing a public benefit for is for the full range of people that live in Los Gatos that might be seniors that may or may not be able to afford those penthouse units. So it troubles me to think that it's, you know, pretty narrow slice of the market. And, you know, I think we all know that Los Gatos is wealthy, but, you know, we're trying to provide housing for, you know, a wide range of people. And as chair of the Housing Element Advisory Board and the General Plan Committee before that, it troubles me to see that this is kind of such a narrow slice. And when I add that onto the fact that this is being built in essentially the hillsides, and even though the hillsides design standards and guidelines don't apply to this project, it was mentioned by the CDAC back when they first saw it that we have to consider it at least in the spirit of the hillside design guidelines. And so I have to ask myself, would we put the tallest building in Los Gatos in our hillsides? And the answer to me says no. And so you know, if I were to get comfortable with this proposal, it would have to be less height. And then I also wanted to comment on the cut and fill. And, you know, this is troubling because, you know, it is desirable from a LEED perspective to do underground parking, but this is also in the hillside. So I wonder, is this for the good of Los Gatos to dig into our hillsides and remove 140,000 cubic yards of soil from our hillsides just to get an underground parking garage? I'm not sure that the benefit outweighs the cost of it. So for me to get comfortable with recommending approval of this, there would have to be some changes, you know, it definitely in reducing the height. And I'm not as sure if I would stand firm on the underground parking because I do see a benefit and a cost, but it might be nice to know what alternatives there are to architecting it in that way.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I also have a number of concerns. So first would be affordable housing and just the the lack of willingness to try to incorporate some form of that was concerning to me, because I mean, the reality is you can, even if you're not required to, and even if you might not profit from it, you can choose to incorporate some affordable units just so that more of the community can be welcomed and more of the needs can be met. And I also wanted to point out that 120 staff would be hired, and we're already seeing people commuting from like Stockton in order to work here because of the housing shortage. And so I think it could be kind of hurting that in multiple ways. And my next concern is definitely the height. I think it's very interesting that there are going to be less units, but the buildings are going to be 2 stories taller. And it seems to me like, because height is such a concern, the units could be smaller. And I also think that there could be less 2-bedroom units in order to try to accommodate this, especially because it is in the hillsides and would be the largest, the tallest building in town. And next is the benefiting of the community at large. I agree that it doesn't really feel like it does this because, I mean, first, who knows how many Los Gatos residents can afford to live here or would get admitted in order to live here. And then the fact that the general public isn't really allowed to utilize this area, it felt to me like it is really a very thin slice of the population that it would be benefiting. And it's something that a lot of us will see every single day. And then last is just like I pointed out earlier, the tree removals. It feels like there could be more effort to preserve some of the trees and to incorporate them into the design and that sort of thing. And it in general just is a concerning number to remove. But yeah, overall, it feels like more luxury housing isn't exactly what we need. And to me, that is concerning.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Clark. Any other comments?
Commissioner Thomas has her hand up, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of concerns too with this project. And at the end of the day, I know that this is just moving a recommendation essentially to the town council, but we're still required to make some findings. And I just don't think that this complies with the general plan in any way, shape, or form. I mean, maybe not in any way, shape, or form is an extreme way to say it, but as a person that just was on the general plan committee and now on the housing element, there's fewer units. It's not the type of housing that we're looking to develop in Los Gatos and that we know we need. And the tree removal, those are just like 3 of many things that I think that it just does not, in my mind, comply with the general plan. And I really tried to come into this like with an open mind and, hope that I was missing something, but the information that I've received tonight is not making me feel any better about it complying with the general plan. So I am curious to hear about what other commissioners think about that. But as far as the information I have in front of me and what I've heard tonight, I do not feel comfortable saying that this aligns with our general plan.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Thomas. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Barnett.
I think with respect to our obligation in this matter, we have to distinguish the plan development application and the CEQA finding, as Mr. Raspy pointed out in his initial remarks. And from the CEQA standpoint, I think that the findings can be made. From the plan development standpoint, I share the concern about the height of the buildings. And with respect to the trees, although mitigation has been proposed, I think that the concern about the traffic coming off of Wood Road is a material factor and should be considered by the council to see if something can be done on that front, whether it needs to be in conjunction with the town or otherwise. And those are my general concerns and comments.
So before calling on Commissioner Hanson again, I share many of the same comments as the commissioners have weighed in with tonight. I do believe that there is a need for senior housing. I think we can agree that there's a need for senior housing. The Meadows was sorely missed when it closed, and I think we're all welcoming something coming back into that facility. But as has been said, it feels very much like luxury exclusive housing. And I understand that it's a senior model and it does provide care, but it provides that at a high expense to the residents of Los Gatos. In particular, when we saw the renderings that the applicant provided of the views from the town, when we see the buildings up above the tree line, it's an alarming thing to see those heights provided in penthouse format. So we're losing the view from the broader public of our hillside, and we're giving it to a small number of potential senior residents. And that seems like an unfair trade to me in terms of benefit to the town of Los Gatos. So I do have a real concern about the height. If the applicant were to say to me or to the commission tonight that it would be willing to consider reduced heights so we don't see the buildings above the trees, and however they made that happen to pencil out with fewer units or units of smaller size, I agree that so many 2-bedrooms seems unnecessary. You could probably take those floors that I'm recommending being taken away and redistribute those into some smaller units. Not all of them. You could still maintain your sense of luxury, but so that's a concern. I don't think it's the business model of a senior community is quite different. I've looked into this extensively for my own mother in this community at large, so I'm very familiar with the different models and how they work. How below market or reduced cost housing would be provided is a great question. I don't know how it would be done, but I'm sure it could be, and that would be a further benefit to the community too. So I think from my standpoint, this the proposal before us has gone a little bit too far in terms of height and luxury for a few people without the benefit to the rest of the town. I would not be inclined to support it moving forward to the town, but I would be inclined if the applicant were interested in scheduling a continuation so that the concerns of the Planning Commission that have been heard tonight can be reconsidered and in a revised plan. Commissioner Hanson.
I'm glad you made all your comments before I asked mine. Mine was more of a process question related to what Commissioner Barnett said. So I wanted to ask our town attorney. We've actually had this scenario in the past where the commission was having issues with the project, but then the EIR is this kind of a different matter. It's sort of its own animal, and if the proper mitigation measures are proposed, and it's not necessarily related to the provability of the project or not. If it were the will of the commission to not move forward with the recommendation, is there any point in recommending approval of the EIR? So I'm asking our town attorney that.
So when you're completed with your deliberations, yes, you certainly could make the recommendation to council that the CEQA document is adequate. And then from there, move on to your second, which would be recommendation, though, that it doesn't meet the plan development requirements and set forth those reasons why. The other question you can ask, you can open the public comment for the limited issue of whether the applicant would even consider a continuance to try to revise his application to see if he can meet the statements made by the Planning Commission. So that's the other issue. Instead of completing it tonight, you could ask the applicant if he's willing to consider making changes to the project and bringing it back. But if not, and the applicant doesn't want to do that, or Planning Commission doesn't want a continuance, then it certainly could make a motion with regards to the CEQA document and then a separate regarding the project.
Okay, thank you.
So follow-up question. I would assume that any changes to the proposal would not materially affect the CEQA document, and therefore approving it would not be a problem. But
Well, you're only doing a recommendation
yeah,
on the CEQA document, but I would imagine that it would not, but we'd have to just see where that would go to if the applicant was changed. We just have to look at it to see how those changes. I envision, maybe they would do something with the height requirement, but that might do something with more grading. I'm just giving an example. And so you might have to then reopen CEQA if there was some new environmental issues. I just don't know at this point in time. We'd have to wait and see how that would develop.
Yeah, and I from my standpoint, it seems prudent that we wouldn't recommend approval of the EIR in advance of a planned development that we could get our approval behind, because we really wouldn't know. And if you think about it in that way, if something did dramatically change, then we would have recommended something that wouldn't be appropriate. So I would be inclined. So if it is the will of the commission to reopen the public hearing, to ask the applicant if they would be willing to undertake a continuation in order to incorporate some of the changes that the Planning Commission has expressed concern about, I'd like to see a show of hands physical. Okay, so it looks like that's unanimous. So at this time, Director Paulson, if you could invite the applicant back for that question, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwood. You can unmute yourself and answer the specific question as to whether or not you're amenable to a continuance.
Well, I'd like to have Laura Worthington Forbes take point on this question. Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
That is. 1 second. Ms. Worthington Forbes, you're unmuted.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think at this point, it would be very helpful if you could clarify what your recommendations are. And then our preference would be to provide us the ability to move forward. If you could make those recommendations, we would take those into consideration in tandem with moving towards a council hearing.
So am I hearing you correctly in that you would not be willing to take a continuance to respond back to the Planning Commission?
That's correct. Our preference would be to understand your recommendations and then consider those recommendations in tandem with the ability to move forward to council and address them at that time.
Thank you. So now we'll close the public portion of the meeting. So I have a question for staff. If we, so this is a no, and if we proceed with, it sounds like what would be a recommendation to deny the planned development as proposed, then we would make the recommendation or articulate why we're saying no. It goes to the town council. If in between our recommendation of denial and the meeting before the town council, if the project materially changes, wouldn't it need to come back to the Planning Commission anyway? We've had this conversation before about the reasons why it would or wouldn't come back to town council. It's usually on the matter of an appeal. So I'm asking procedurally, how would that work?
So you're absolutely right. Our appeal procedures do specifically state that if new information is provided that wasn't available to the Planning Commission, the council has the ability to send it back to Planning Commission. You've seen that happen on many occasions. This is just a recommendation, so council would be completely at their discretion. They certainly could, if in fact they felt like the Planning Commission needs to weigh in on the issues of a change project, they certainly could send it back to Planning Commission, but it's not as absolute as the ordinance is relating to appeals.
All right, thank you for that clarification. So just want to check in with the members of the commission. Is everyone clear on where we stand at this point? All right, so Commissioner Rask, did you have a question?
Just one quick question. I understand how we are standing with respect to the PD. what about with respect to the EIR?
Yeah,
Are we-
good next question. So if we make a recommendation to deny the PD, and we also make a recommendation to deny the EIR because we don't know yet what the final form of the PD might be, we could also say we recommend approval of the EIR if the plan development that the town council might approve is materially, it will not materially impact the EIR. I'm not sure which is the best way to proceed.
Well, I don't know if there's a best way. I'll jump in, and then if the town attorney has anything additional. There's multiple options. You just laid out 2 of them. Also you can have the conversation amongst yourselves. You've had this come up before, where an applicant has stated they're not interested in a continuance. Obviously, ultimately up to the planning commission. So you really have a lot of different options to move forward.
Discussion from the commission, how people would like to proceed. Yeah, Commissioner Clark, then Arasmi.
I just wanted to clarify when we asked about their willingness to return. I felt like they used the word preference a lot, but never really said whether they would actually be willing. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out because I think that there is a chance that like maybe they would prefer that over outright denial.
I think I asked the question for clarification, but does the commission agree that it was unclear? Should we reopen to make that very specific question? Commissioner Hanson?
I didn't think it was unclear. I think they want to take their chances with the town council, and that they wanted to have further direction from us. And it might have been that they wanted to make changes to the proposal between that and now, and that was why you asked your question. So it doesn't, since this isn't truly an appeal, it wouldn't apply, and the council couldn't do whatever they wanted. But I don't think that they have an interest in coming back to the planning commission. That was my interpretation.
Commissioner Raspy, did you have a question or comment?
2 comments. First of all, I agree with Commissioner Hanson's interpretation of what just transpired. Additionally, with respect to the EIR, my thinking would be that we would do a recommendation to not approve it until we have a more definitive PD in hand. So I wouldn't want to create a living document, for instance, that exists out there separate from the PD. Just my thought.
Any other comments? Commissioner
Here,
Thomas.
Tom. Yeah. Sure.
I agree. I think that we can, deny the request, or make the recommendation to deny the request solely based on the fact that we can say, I think within our recommendation to town council, we can say we don't see any material issues with the environmental impact report, right? Can we just agree that we don't have any major, or can we just discuss that for a moment? Because I'm a little bit unclear where other commissioners stand on that specifically. I think Commissioner Hanson. Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Hanson.
I meant to comment on that. I agree 100% with Commissioner Raspy. Well, if the project were not to change at all from where it stands today, certainly I have no issues with the environmental impact report, which was done based on the project as it stands today, as well as the alternatives that are always proposed, including no project or lesser project and so on and so forth. But it makes no sense at all to me if, with the number of changes that I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners that would be desired to make this acceptable for approval, that it wouldn't make any sense to say that the EIR was certifiable, because we would expect the project to change pretty substantially. And even though the changes we would be asking would probably be less impact in the environmental report, it wouldn't be the same. So to me, it doesn't make sense to recommend approval of one and not the other.
All right, thank you for that. So it sounds like we have a motion at hand. Are we making a motion, Director Paulson?
Yes, you'll need to make a motion.
All right. Commissioner Barnett?
And I believe Commissioner Barnett, yeah.
Not sure I heard Mr. Paulson right, but would it be the power of the Planning Commission to continue this matter without agreement by the applicant?
That's always at the discretion of the Planning Commission.
The only problem I see with that is that we could continue it and they come back with the same or the proposal unchanged, and that, you know, we've just, you know, spent essentially wasted a lot of time without moving it along. I did not hear from, I heard in so many words, as Commissioner Hansen stated, that they're willing to take their chances with town council making a determination that's different from the direction that we are recommending or will be recommending. So I personally would not be in favor of the Planning Commission making a unilateral decision to continue this, but I am open to other commissioners. If that's the will of the commission, we can certainly do that. I'm seeing a shaking head. I don't see any traction behind that approach. So I'm still looking for a motion from Commissioner Hansen.
Okay, I will make an attempt at it. So I'm going to make a motion to recommend denial of the planned development ordinance. I'm going to ask staff, do I need to put the numbers in there or anything? As it's defined in our staff report, and for the reasons that were given, not the least of which would be the height, the trees, the lack of diversity in the housing types, too much concentration in luxury, and there were some other issues mentioned by the commissioners. So while the project certainly has some merit, it would need to be revised to be something that we could recommend approval on. And then in addition to that, because we don't find that the planned development ordinance as proposed can be recommended for approval, we also recommend not certifying the final EIR because it is not based on the project that we would like to see that we think is approvable. Is there anything else I need to include, staff?
No, I think you've incorporated the findings for denial. If you or any other commissioners or the seconder want to provide any additional comments related to why you're finding that the PD doesn't meet those findings, then that would also be helpful for the council as they consider this.
Well, and the council does receive copies of our meetings, and so the details of our discussion will be available to them. But I think just a quick articulation, as Commissioner Hansen has given, is good, just in case we don't get a thorough read. Is there anything else that commissioners would like to add to that, or do we have a second for the motion? Commissioner Thomas.
I would ask the maker of the motion that we could add in also the reduced number of units, but the increase in the really like the height of the buildings too. So just that as a note that seems problematic and doesn't align with the general plan.
So you're, I think what I heard you say was backward from what you intended.
Oh,
we have a concern with the height. We have a concern with the height, and if that means reducing the number of units, then reduce the number of units or reduce the size.
I was saying that like they're asking yes, they are reducing the number of units from what was previously there, but they're making it taller.
Oh, I see. Right.
So yeah, just the ratio of like number of units to the overall height and size of the buildings and the property does not seem to be in compliance with what our town needs right now.
All right.
And I would even add on that what Commissioner Thomas said earlier, that the things that I was citing are things that are founded in the general plan, as well as, even though it isn't strictly applicable, the spirit of it is in the hillside design standards and guidelines as well. So
Yes. And then I second the motion.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Do we have any discussion of the motion, comments? Commissioner Barnett. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. I would recommend underlining to the council where there's been a point of agreement or two by the applicant concerning first the valet parking. And let's see, there was another point of agreement.
I think sidewalks on Broadway.
Sidewalks on Broadway was another one. There's still another one.
Traffic on Wood, the traffic abatement on Wood.
Yeah, the contribution to the traffic control on Wood Road and Highway 17.
Is the maker of the motion comfortable with adding those?
yes.
And the seconder? Yes. All right. Any other changes or comments on the motion on the table? All right, seeing no hands raised, then I'll call the question. By roll call, please vote yes, no, or abstain. Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, we now move on to other business, which is election of chair and vice chair. But before we go on to doing that, I just wanted to thank you for entrusting me as your chair this past year. I hope I've served you and the town of Los Gatos to the best of my abilities. Look forward to working with you and continuing our important work for the town. So hats off to you guys. It is my duty as the outgoing chair to nominate my replacement. And we know that the upcoming year will see numerous weighty and complicated and perhaps controversial matters, even more than those that we've heard over the last few years. In light of that, I propose to nominate a chair with the most experience among us, which is Commissioner Hanson. Do I have a second for that nomination? Commissioner Clark, thank you. I'll now call the question. By roll call, Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Barnett,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And so at this point, we congratulate newly appointed Chair Hanson and turn the meeting over to the elected chair, who will now nominate her vice chair and continue to the end of the meeting.
Thank you, former Chair Janoff. And I would also like to thank Chair Janoff for all she's done in the past year leading us through. And I've been fortunate also to have Chair Janoff be the vice chair of the General Plan Committee and now the Housing Element Advisory Board. So I am glad that we'll continue to work in that perspective together again and to have her on the commission moving forward. And I look forward to working with all of you over the next year. So with that in mind, I would like to nominate a commissioner who's been with us for a while and who has made a lot of contributions and who has also led up the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, and that is Commissioner Barnett. So I would like to nominate him for vice chair. Do I have a second? Commissioner Tabana?
I second that.
Okay. And are there any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I will do a roll call vote, and I will start with Commissioner Tabana.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Vice Chair, almost Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes. Thank you.
And I vote yes as well. So it passes unanimously. All right. Congratulations to Vice Chair Barnett, and we look forward to having him in our leadership. And there is one more thing that we wanted former Chair Janoff and I wanted to cover under the other business, and that is the appointments of the commissioners. We've discussed this with pretty much everyone. The Planning Commission has seats on the following committees or commissions. And the first is the General Plan Committee, which in its current form is going to be the Housing Element Advisory Board over the next year or year plus. And so we have 3 seats on that, and that will be Commissioner Janoff, myself, and Commissioner Thomas, who have been doing it for the last year. And since we wanted to continue that for continuity's sake. And then we also have 3 seats on the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, and we'd like for Vice Chair Barnett to continue in that role, as well as Commissioner Tabana, and also Commissioner Janoff will join as the 3rd member. And then we have the 2 seats on the Historic Preservation Committee, and we are asking Commissioner Raspy, who's been serving in that capacity before, to continue and lead us in that area, as well as our new Commissioner Clark. So I congratulate everyone on your appointed positions. And then I don't know if we will be having another meeting in January, but there certainly is one on the schedule. And so we'll find out from staff if there's sufficient items over the next week or so. And then we do need to also get the report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Just a couple quick things. We will be having a strategic priorities session with the council. So the council will be holding that on the 25th, on Tuesday the 25th. And then the other thing I would like to let folks know is that the town council will consider whether or not they want to extend the urgency ordinance that they adopted on the 21st of December regarding Senate Bill 9. So definitely keep an eye on that. Always a work in progress on that front as we continue to hopefully receive additional direction. And with that, I would also like to announce that we have promoted Sean Mullen from associate planner to senior planner at the end of last year. And we also have a new assistant planner who is interning for us, Savannah Van Aken, who is also appointed. And then we're currently looking for another associate planner to backfill Sean's position. So a lot of moving parts.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Mr. Paulson, do you know what time the strategic priorities meeting with town council will be? Sometimes they're or a little bit earlier. So
I believe it's 7, but I will have our admin staff send that out to the planning commissioners, just so you're aware in case it's a different time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. And I think that is all the things that we have to cover. Is there anything else that any of the commissioners wanted to ask or talk about? Because we do have this time in the meeting for commission matters. We're not seeing none. It is 10:30. I'm sure everyone would like to be done. And so with that, I will call this meeting adjourned, and we will see you all probably in a couple weeks. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.